for a parking problem.
Foreigner 23.
Yeah, that's where I'm gonna 28. Come on, truck when you're ready.
Hey guys, was just rebooting the computer. Sorry about the delay. So we have a special show tonight. I'm going to bring in Kate and Daniel from Drunken Turkey. Sorry, Daniel. Um, and I think maybe Boundless Millennial Matt Doherty will be here too, but we'll see. And before I do, I just want to quickly I want to start every single one of my shows until it gets so monotonous, until it's drilled into everybody's heads a certain fact here. It's that important. And you guys might get sick of it, but please bear with me. It's going to take 20 seconds in every show. The U.S. Attorney, Josh Levy, very uniquely and strangely participated himself in the questioning of the witnesses in the grand jury related to the Karen Reed case. In addition, as I've said many times on this channel, he used as a visual display on which to base his questions that was a blow up that was visible for the witnesses of TB Daily News. And furthermore, strangely, Turtle Boy, an egomaniac who normally would be bragging about this, he's aware of it. He's responded to it by deflecting. He ignores it. Those things mean something. All of those issues. The fact that the U.S. Attorney was this closely personally involved in this case. The fact that he chose to use TB Daily News, the blogger of Turtle Boy, at the very time when his witnesses were being hounded by Turtle Boy and a murder defendant, is meaningful. And the fact that Turtle Boy doesn't brag about this is meaningful. I'm not going to connect the dots, but I'm going to introduce every show on that until somebody at that U.S. Attorney's office gets to the bottom of this, because something very unusual and seemingly very improper has gone on there. Let me bring in Kate and Daniel. Hi, Kate.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Daniel. Do we know if Matt's coming?
He responded to the email in the affirmative, so I think so.
Okay, very good. Just before, I also want to mention today, Kate, and you may not be aware of this, Daniel, but Kate certainly is, that Turtle Boy now has released the address of the special prosecutor, Hank Brennan.
And the phone number.
And the phone number.
Yeah. And
the Free Karen Reed mob is posting satellite images, and I don't want to over describe it, but it's clearly a problem. And what bothers me is there's no way that all these mainstream media sources are oblivious to this. Ted Daniel, Howie Carr, Christina Rex, Sue O'Connell. They have an obligation to report this. And I don't know, I guess, and I'm not criticizing them. I think, Christina Rex has done a great job. And Ted Daniel has sometimes done an okay job. But this is an important thing. You have a mob that is encouraging people to attack a special prosecutor. At what point do you report the truth about what's going on here? And just to even add to that, so Atlantic does, I guess I didn't read it, but a glowing article about Turtle Boy a couple weeks ago. This is why it's so important for local media to report the truth about Turtle Boy, because how is Atlantic to really find out exactly what this guy is and what the phenomena is? Because they're not going to go on social media, and if they see me and Kate or other people criticizing or exposing what Turtle Boy does, they're going to say, "Oh, that's just a YouTube local turf war up there," or something like that. This is why it's so important for them to see Ted Daniel on Fox 25 and Christina Rex accurately describe what this guy does. It's not an isolated incident. He's done this all the time. A few months ago, he threatened to bring his mob to the soccer games of the Attorney General's kids. You can't ignore this. They have to report this stuff.
I think once it hits court is usually when they report, to be fair. I would say, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this one's probably going to hit court. Very stupid move when you're out on bail and like 20 charges. The thing is, like, you can't hide behind it's publicly available information. Technically, all of doxing is. Where it crosses over is when it's done for the purposes of harassment. Now, I don't know for sure, but I would bet some money that Hank Brennan is getting some harassing phone calls and possibly visits to his home tonight. And previously, he wasn't getting harassing phone calls and visits to his home. And there's only one thing that's changed there, and that is Turtle Boy posting his personal information. So, once that hits court, usually they do report on it. Not everything is newsworthy in the moment. That's just like, the same thing with like Hank Brennan's home address is not newsworthy. It's not news. That's not journalism, but here we are. It's out in public.
I mean, it's newsworthy. So, Daniel, just let me quickly respond. That it's newsworthy. The fact that the Turtle Boy has just revealed this, that to me, that's newsworthy. The fact that it's happened, the fact that his address isn't newsworthy, but the fact that this local blogger who was in court this week with Karen, who is facing 20 charges or something like that for witness intimidation, is now trying to dox the special prosecutor here. That to me is newsworthy. But Daniel, have you seen anything like this in your area or in any other true crime case that you've looked at?
I've never seen anything like that. That's actually 100% disgusting and disturbing to me. And it's because of the intent behind it. Obviously, it's not, hey, let's go send them some flowers and a get well soon or whatever the case may be. It's an almost an an attack to a certain extent. This is the first time I hear of it. I find it to be absolutely horrid that this person who I mean, I've never seen any of his content. I can't talk about what he says or what he doesn't say. I've seen some clips here and there. I saw this one thing that was just absolutely Bush League and juvenile. I think Jennifer Coffindaffer had posted it on her Twitter or X account, and it was him talking about some of the things about I mean, I didn't even want to repeat the things he says about himself, getting excited about, when he hears certain things about the witnesses and yada, yada, yada. And, to me, I'm just like, all right, he's claiming to be a journalist. That's the claim, right? As far as his text messages go and all this other stuff, that it's all journalism and yada, yada, yada. Well, act like one. I mean, it's not professional to be in this manner and doing certain things. It's not professional, and which was what journalism is. I mean, yes, it's getting down to the facts. Yes, it's, being able to get the truth that's out there. And I'm not necessarily saying that's what he's doing, but you can do it in a manner of professionalism. And
right.
I think it's dangerous because there's some folks out there on both sides, whether they think she's innocent or they think they think she's guilty, that have gotten, overly indulged in this case to the point where, they may see his address and think, hey, I may need to go do something because, hey, this case isn't looking like it's going the way I want it to go, the way it went the last time. And it can be a very dangerous thing. It's absolutely disgusting to hear that's going on.
Well, historically, that's what has happened. He put out the witnesses' addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, all that. And as a result of that, his followers have continually called, texted these people, showed up at their houses. There have been some incidents of identity theft because of the social security numbers. So, I mean, once is a fluke, but 3-4 times now we've got a pattern, right? Like, he knows what's going to happen when he releases this information because it's happened over and over and over again. You can't claim ignorance anymore. And again, I fail to see how the home address and phone number of the special prosecutor in the Karen Reed case it constitutes news. It doesn't, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. To me, it's newsworthy because if you're not, this is a huge part of this case is not just obviously justice for John, justice for Karen. Those are essential parts of this case. But one of the reasons I've put so much time into covering this case is seeing this mob form and the mob tactics they use and the organized mob tactics, which is some of what we're going to talk about here tonight with the new evidence that Kate has uncovered. But much of this goes back to this Turtle Boy tactics that have been developed over the years because he knows he can terrify police officers, officials, lawyers, the public, anybody, newspaper journalists, and I talk to them all, who are afraid to go against him because he will smear them in social media. And at some point, it's important for regular media to report this phenomena. It is one of the most disturbing phenomena of our time. In New England anyways, and that this is going on and it's allowed to continue. And when I say allowed to continue, there's no real way to stop it because people do have First Amendment rights. So most of these things are difficult to stop. And so this is why it's so important that the media does its job and put this out there so the public has a legitimate idea about what they're dealing with here, what the phenomenon is. So they're no longer presenting Turtle Boy as just a truth teller with rough edges or something like that. What? No, he is consciously wielding this social media threat of smear. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, my question is, I mean, I've not followed him at all, but why hasn't there been a lawsuit against him from one of these witnesses? What is preventing that? Are they trying to go through this trial first? I know it's already gone through. They already had the first round. I know it ended in a mistrial, but what's preventing some of these witnesses from suing him? I mean, he's made probably quite a bit of money throughout this entire case at their expense. And that's probably well documented through YouTube and stuff like that about the amount of money that he's made. That amount can easily be suable. I'm just kind of questioning why hasn't it happened yet?
It will happen. It's sort of a one situation at a time thing, but I can assure you, it's happening. He's being sued, and I don't think that sorry, this puppy. I don't think that the motivation there is necessarily recovering damages. I think most people understand that that is not likely to happen. You know, whatever money he has or hasn't made. First of all, the guy is a pathological liar, and he continually inflates his own worth, his own self-worth, the numbers, everything else. So it's very hard to pin down how much he's actually made versus what he says. And I'm sure that most of it is spent because he's also a drug addict who rents, you know, and doesn't exactly live like the rest of us do, you know, in terms of the way that he spends his money. Clearly, just, and I'm saying this because he talks a lot about how he gambles. Obviously, we know that he abuses Adderall. That's not a lie. I mean, not a secret, rather, nor is it a lie. You know, I don't know how much they'll get, if anything at all. And I know, because I used to work with him, that he fully is willing to hide his assets the best that he can, were he never actually lose the civil suit.
Do what they did to Alex Jones and take his channel away from him.
Well, that's, I guess, really what it comes down to, is these witnesses deserve to have their reputations restored. And nobody wants to see him continue doing what he's doing, because he's just hurt so many people. So again, I don't think the motivation in these lawsuits is trying to get money out of the guy. I think it's really to shut him down.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I hear that.
So I would like to make a quick announcement too. The book is finally available for pre-order.
Oh, really?
So I just posted the link there. The only thing that's available is actually the Kindle version, but eventually there is an Audible version that's in the works, and the print version will be up there eventually too. So right now, if you want to pre-order the book, it's not very expensive. It's only like $6.46, and if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. I'm not sure why they chose it to price that way, but they did. I told them I didn't care if they put it as 99 cents. I'm not doing it to make money, but I want the publisher to get their money back for the investment. So, you know, I know people here would have been just to be supportive. So let me post it again. It's called Storm of Suspicion, and just put it again. And I've also tweeted it, and I'll make it regularly up there on Twitter over the next few days, and maybe put some excerpts up and stuff like that. So it comes out on April 1st, and it says the Karen Reed murder trial, Storm of Suspicion, the trials of the decade. So so appreciate the support, guys. Thank you very much. And now I have up here Kate's video. I don't know if you want me. So the other day I played about half this video on the channel, Kate. I didn't want to play all of it just because I felt like I was pilfering your content. So I didn't.
Oh, no, never worry about that. Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to play it. And I just kept directing people to go see the end of it at your channel. But, you know, your editing skills, your video editing skills are incredible, you know. Not that that's what people want to hear about, but I love like the old newspaper style fonts you were using here and the backgrounds. That was just, it's really good. Do you want to play part of this now, or do you want to just?
That's totally up to you. I hate the sound of my own voice.
Oh, that's I do too, and it's apparently there's some scientific reason that people hate the sound of their own voice.
Yeah.
So
if you ask my wife, she says I love the sound of mine.
Well, let's just play like a couple minutes so you get a sense of it.
The word gets thrown around a lot, but at its core, a grifter manipulates emotions, distorts facts, and exploits situations for personal gain, often at the expense of truth and integrity. Nowhere is this more evident than in the so-called Free Karen Reed movement, a spectacle built entirely on deception. Karen Reed, accused of killing her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, hasn't just denied responsibility. She's spun an elaborate web of conspiracy theories to rally support. Far from a pursuit of justice, this movement is a masterclass.
Well, the council made the bill.
Driven by opportunists chasing clout, money, and influence.
100%, yeah.
And the biggest grifter of them all?
I've never seen any of these people.
Karen Reed herself.
So we'll stop it there. So that's on Masshole Mafia, guys. To go, maybe we'll play a little bit more of it later, but please, go check it out on Kate's channel, Masshole Mafia, to see the whole video. I think it's about 15, 16 minutes long, actually 17 minutes long. And She's a pretty good editor, huh, Daniel?
That's pretty good. I enjoyed it. I'm not familiar. See, I'm very new to the Karen Reed case. I tried to stay away from it mainly because I only saw parts and pieces of it. I saw that there was some tell-like controversy, and from just a glance, it kind of looks kind of weird. Just at a glance before you go into it, break it down and look at it, and then you start hearing about what had occurred with the other young lady in that area that the law enforcement in the area try to make look like a suicide, and they end up getting arrested. And so I actually stayed away from it because I thought that there was some corrupt stuff going on there, but I saw this whole mob of bad people that were in on it, and I was like, I just want to stay far away from this. I'm not much about attacking victims and victim family members and things of that nature. And so it felt like before I actually dug into it and got into it that, if I covered it, I didn't want to align myself with that sort of crowd. And so I had some folks kind of reach out, tell me, just look into it. And I did. And I was like, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was. And that's a testament to, because I know a lot of people, because I cover the Brian Koberger case, and a lot of people think I'm just pro law enforcement. That doesn't, that no matter what, I'm just going to believe law enforcement. And that wasn't necessarily the case with Karen Reed. And it didn't take me long, though. I'll be honest with you. I just had to look at the video of the car backing out of the driveway, slightly touch John O'Keefe's car, and see nothing left in the snow to determine that. All right, well, obviously, this is before John's body's found. The vehicle was in the garage, so it was protected by the elements, or protected from the elements. And there's a piece missing. What are we doing here? It's pretty obvious. But yeah, that's kind of where I am on it. I am glad that I did look into it and see that it wasn't this scenario where it was just law enforcement doing the wrong thing here. I don't necessarily think that Proctor did everything right. I know I'm fairly honest, and I'm very honest, and I'm very straightforward. And I don't think he did I don't think he was the most correct person in this either. How do you feel about his termination? I know that you thought he was the most vetted cop, and which he was. I mean, he had all his phones and stuff looked into, and his activity throughout his entire career. What do you think about his termination? I know were you surprised by that?
No, and I think obviously punishment was required here. Reading through the charges that they decided against him, it was obviously the insensitive remarks made a big difference, but there was also communicating some insignificant but some details of the case with people that are outside the investigation. And then there was an incident where I think they only discovered this through the feds looking through his messages, but where months after this, he was on assignment and went to a restaurant and had some beers with Kevin Albert. So those were the issues on which it was based. Whether these things, one thing that we do know is between the feds and the state police, they both had their own incentive to want to destroy this guy. Because for the feds, they were duped by Karen, but now at this point, you're all in. That's the side you're on. So they had an incentive to try to destroy him, and they went back through his messages 5 years. And the Mass State Police, once the insensitive nature of those messages came out of the trial last year, the liberal governor in this state wanted to make sure they got rid of him. So both the state and the feds did everything they could to find some tangible reason to get rid of this guy, and they really didn't find anything new or anything else. So when I say he's the most vetted cop, it seems like if this guy had fixed a speeding ticket, 3 years ago, they would have found it. So that's all I was saying on that.
Yeah. I wasn't shocked. Talking about that, the specifics of what you were mentioning, even though that the words he was saying, I've arrested people that have done some pretty bad stuff. And I've said some things that probably would have gotten me in trouble as well. Especially, I bring up a situation where I arrested a guy who SA'd his own daughter and his stepdaughter. And we arrested him, and somebody confiscated texting wasn't a big deal thing then, but if somebody overheard what I was saying about how disgusting this guy was, I probably would have gotten in trouble too. uh, you know, but the no nude stuff, that's kind of crossing a different type of line. It's one thing to have an opinion and think something negative about somebody based on what they did or potentially could have done, and another thing to at least give the appearance that you're looking for those things. And when it comes to law enforcement, there is the if you give a black eye, so to speak, to the department, that's a fireable offense, at least here in Texas. I'm not sure about it in the Massachusetts area, but I'm fairly positive that's something across the nation. I wasn't surprised that he was terminated, but in the end, I don't think that what he did overall made a difference in the case as far as, did he, do something for the Alberts that perhaps would have gotten them off, or perhaps, like a lot of people are speculating, did he plant evidence, which I really don't see any evidence of that at all.
Right.
I just see somebody talking bad.
Let me just introduce Matt and just tell everybody about our 4 different channels here, because people here from each channel watching this, and then we'll get to what Kate wants to talk about. So, hey, Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is Boundless Millennial. Many of you guys already know him. So because people from different channels, my channel is Yellow Cottage Tales, so please feel free to come in and subscribe. Matt's channel is Boundless Millennial, and he does some of the most well thought out but also most entertaining videos on this topic. And then this is Daniel from Drunken Turkeys, and he joins us with a real dog bite wound. And so please head out to his channel and subscribe to Drunken Turkeys. You'll find he's done excellent work on the Kohlberger case, among others, but that's one of his big topics now. And then you all probably know Kate, Masshole Mafia, so please go subscribe to her channel too. And before we just get to that, Matt, is there anything you want to say into reaction to what we've been talking about or what Daniel just said?
I mean, I kind of expected Proctor to be fired. I don't think that he's done anything that the majority of police officers don't do. I think that most homicide detectives probably talk trash about murderers. Like, I think that, there's venting that happens to your friends and family. You're dealing with like the scum of society. And I just think that he's scapegoated in this whole thing. I think he'll probably get his job back after this is all over. I think this is to show that, Mass State Police doesn't put up with this, and there's going to be punishment. But the things that he was fired for really were not for covering anything up. And I think he was right about everything. She has a whack job. And, like what kind of person is going to pretend and blame all their friends for doing something like this when they all know you're a lying piece of shit? Like, it's insane. Like, the woman is not right in the head. So,
okay, Kate, let's get to the beat of tonight's show. What do you have to take as long as you like? Anything you want to talk about and introduce new evidence?
Oh no. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, obviously I did that video. A lot of controversy, particularly about the the possibility of paid supporters, paid protesters. And I think that I was clear about this in the video, but just want to reiterate that it's speculative. That's something that's very difficult to prove. However, when you look at sort of where this thing started versus where it was sort of at the height of fundraising in the middle of the trial versus how it's gone now, I think it's really interesting that the numbers have dwindled right back down to when it first began, right? So at first you had Turtle Boy, he was kind of a lone wolf there, maybe 15 to 30 people showing up. And then all of a sudden she starts getting all this money rolling in. And now it's ballooned to, hundreds of people.
That is not Turtle Boy biting, Kate.
It's not. No, it's a different ankle biter today. But yeah, so I thought it was interesting. I also think that it's interesting. So I got this information afterwards, but I got access to some more of the admin chats. So this is, of course, the people who are organizing all of this stuff for Karen. And interestingly enough, from like June to July, really when like a ton of people were showing up, even a little bit earlier than that, I think. They're in the admin chats. They are questioning where all these new people came from. They are saying, we don't recognize any of these people. Who are they? They're not very friendly. Where did they come from? So even Karen's own inner circle, these people that are essentially supposed to be organizing all of this for her, saw this influx of protesters show up and had no idea where they came from. And they went away as quickly as they came, which I think is pretty interesting. I am starting to feel more and more like everything about Karen is a facade, right? It's all fraudulent. They're putting a lot of effort into creating this image of this huge, national movement, grassroots, injustice. And I don't think it's real. I don't.
Mm-hmm. So what's some of the hardest evidence? So what you're saying is there's smoke, so there may be a fire.
Right.
So what would constitute all the different aspects of this that would create the smoke?
So definitely just the inconsistencies in the amount of people showing up. I think it's interesting. And I think that, where the biggest question mark really lies is the financial transparency, right? We know we don't know how much she's actually brought in because a lot of it goes straight to her Venmo. No. A lot of it goes straight to her Venmo. And it's kind of, obfuscated. I can never say that word. So it's just kind of murky. And then, of course, all the raffles, we have no idea where that money is coming in and going. And there's been a lot of illegal raffles. But we know that she's raised at least, I think she's up to almost $800,000 right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that her legal fees were paid prior to any fundraising starting, right? Right off the bat, she paid for her legal fees. So she's raising money for legal fees. But they've already been paid. And so, especially with the first trial, it's a little bit perplexing because now they're pivoting and saying, well, it's for experts. They only called a handful of experts. Where is all this money going, right? And so, unfortunately, we're kind of left to fill in the blanks with where the money could be going. And I think that when you couple that with how unusual some of the public support has been for her and how it kind of came out of nowhere, that you could at least kind of start to draw the conclusion or the inference. Come on, out. Goodbye. You could start to draw the inference that perhaps some of this is paid. Definitely, I think the strongest thing that we can take away from this is that there is a huge problem with the money that's being raised and where it's actually going, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any dark money coming in here?
What do you mean by that?
So like money from sources that have their own, maybe they just really believe in Karen, or maybe they have their own agenda and they want to hide their donations. But so if like big ticket money, some of them might donate $20,000 or something like that. And I'm not talking about someone that's a close friend of Karen's, like say that Silvera. He's a friend of Karen, so we understand.
Right.
So someone that might have their own agenda here or something like that.
No, I mean, I don't see any evidence of that. It sounds like the big ticket donators out of Karen's own mouth were all people that she knew in her previous life, coworkers. So I know that's where a lot of the funds have come from, right? As far as like the large donations go. And then of course there's, we kind of discovered that Luke Wilkinson issue there, that connection. And I thought that was kind of interesting too, because that draws, more of the fundraising into question about how much is actually organic.
Mm-hmm. Did you find out if it's a real person?
No, yeah, he's a real person. He owns a company called Razor. It's a fundraising company. It's essentially to professionally fundraise, and part of that is a little bit of astroturfing, right? Moving your fundraiser up on the ranks there so that it is more easily searched and found, and creating the image of more contributors than it actually has.
So Daniel, have you seen any other cases or heard of any other cases that you've studied that have anything similar? So say astroturfing, where you're hiring professional protesters, or where you're hiring PR people to run social media campaigns. Have you seen anything like that?
Just in politics, and I wouldn't be surprised if they took a page out of a political playbook to do something similar to that. But I also do think that there is a growing mob that goes from case to case, looking for the next big controversial, or maybe not even next big case, but just next case to make controversial. Whether it be Richard Allen, Karen Reed, Brian Koberger, they have their pro burgers, their free Rickies, and FKRs on all of them. And I've seen that, it's kind of grown with each one of them. And I think that it's in some part, it's all the same folks following the same people. Those creators are talking about the same different cases. So now they're pulling in people from different cases. So now you have, pro burgers going into the Karen Reed case and listening to these creators who are anti-law enforcement or prosecution, regardless of whatever the case may be. They're going to go with the defense regardless. And now you're building more and more of a mass. And, I see this as becoming an issue, to be 110% honest with you. I see it in the Brian Koberger case. Now, I think in the Koberger case, it's a little bit different because they just found that this guy bought the knife and it's been put out there, right? So there's a lot more evidence there that's without police question, right? With the Massachusetts stuff, there's some question there with law enforcement. That's not necessarily the case in Brian Koberger's case. So there's been a little bit of a number drop. I think I've seen with the pro burgers, they're still pretty strong, but I would have expected to see some of the same thing with the Karen Reed case with the amount of bombshells that have been dropped here recently. But I think it's a mob. I really do. I think it's a mob that's growing from one place to another. And it's quite dangerous because I think that, I say it a lot, to a hammer, everything's a nail. And I think that to these folks, everybody is innocent. There's a bunch of real killers out there committing crimes and getting away with it. And it's just insane.
Matt, what do you think?
I mean, I see this too. I know there are PR companies that approach creators. I've been approached for different cases where they're like, oh, can you make a video for this much money? So I absolutely.
Oh, I want to hear about that. I'm very interested. Go ahead, please. I want to hear any details on that. That'll be really good.
I can't say the name of the company, but like in general, it was something that I was already talking about, and I was already on the same side that they wanted me to be on. So they're like, oh, can you put out a video? You talked about this last year. We want people to start talking about this again. And I said, sure. I already had videos, so put it out. Get paid. You can't talk about it. And I know that Karen Reed is doing that. I don't think that like Koberger is doing it, but because I don't think that he has the means. But I think that naturally there is this group of people that is just like foaming at the mouth and hates law enforcement and thinks that everyone's framed and thinks that everything's shady and is so quick to judge people with zero evidence. But then when there's this mountain of evidence against the actual suspect, they ignore it, but they look at all these stupid little things like the roommates in the Idaho 4 case, all the 11 people in the house, like kids and adults in the Karen Reed case. And it just seems to be, I don't know, it's entertainment for them. They're not taking it seriously. They're not treating it like it's actually real, like it's a crime where people were murdered and these are victims and these are witnesses and like these people are traumatized, and they're treating it like entertainment. So I think there's like a couple of things going on. I think there is this mass of like weird people that like I don't know, they just like latch onto these things, but there are these PR companies.
Right.
And I found it interesting because when I was approached, I was like, oh, so this is what's going on. And, I was just thinking about definitely Karen Reed and definitely like some of the other cases that, you just all of a sudden it's just like flooding in your TikTok feed or on YouTube. Yeah. You're just seeing everything about these cases, and it's, some of it might be organic, but I think that, you can definitely create that by like just approaching a few, and it could be a few small creators that don't make money. Tell them what to talk about. They're all saying the same thing. And it's similar to how right before Karen Reed's documentary came out, there was a bunch of small creators that I never heard of that are like, Karen Reed is innocent. I saw this documentary. And like, I don't know anyone that watched that documentary like legitimately and was like, oh yeah, she's definitely innocent because she seems whacked out in that documentary.
Did you watch the documentary, Daniel?
Which one?
There was a documentary that came out this past week called "The Body in the Snow." It was on Discovery ID and HBO Max.
Yeah, the one I saw you in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in for about 4.5 seconds, but yeah.
Yeah, I saw you. I saw you.
A little bit more than
"Hey,
that.
I know that guy. I know that guy." You know, I did see it. I think there's a lot of her story changing and stuff like that. But one last thing, real quick, to touch on that last topic. That guy, Luigi Mangione. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a clear indication of that mob. Just doesn't matter if the guy's guilty or not, whether the
Yeah.
guy committed the crime or not. That guy's getting money through the cahoots, for his defense team, and he's well off, coming from a well off family, and I think he was found with a manifesto and a bunch of other stuff. So, I mean, that just kind of tells you the mob mentality. It doesn't matter. They may even know that they're wrong. It don't matter. It don't matter.
And in that case there, no one's I'm going to guess that in that case there, most of the fans, they don't say that he didn't do it. They're just supporting that he did do it because of the guy they killed. Right. So at least they're not alleging a conspiracy.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of people claiming he was at their facility on the date in question across the web. But as far as the documentaries go, I mean, a lot of people give her lawyers a bunch of credit, but I question their train of thought on that one, on allowing their client to go out and completely, time after time, change her story, say something differently, incriminate herself even more, talk about this other witness stuff, intimidation stuff that's been going on, now kind of putting some credibility to it, to the point where I believe they're going to now check her phone. And good luck with that one. I'm really looking forward to what they find in that.
Well, she wiped her phone. So the state police got a search warrant for the phones. She had 2 actually. And the affidavit is public. And, a lot of compelling, what people tend to ignore here is they got enough probable cause for that search warrant, right? So they go to her house and they knock on her door and she doesn't answer. And inexplicably, they sit there for 45 minutes knocking on the door while she wipes her phone, hands it to one of the troopers and says something to the effect of, "Good luck, you're going to need it." Mm-hmm. So that was the last that had kind of leaked out about that.
But they have his, right? Turtle Boys?
What's that?
Yeah.
They have his. They have 2 phones that they've already actively searched. I think there's 4 more phones. I think it's 4 more phones that they need to go through, and then 2, I think it's like a tablet and a computer too. So what he's doing right now is he's playing sort of a delay game with his attorneys, where they're just constantly relitigating issues surrounding the search to try to keep off the taint team protocol. And I suspect that's to try to insulate Karen Reed from the contents of that phone, because were she to pick up a new charge, prior to this murder case being resolved one way or the other, then her bail would be revoked. I know. Yeah.
See, one thing though, Karen was very cautious from the moment she started trying to come out with the media on this. So initially, she was using Natalie as a go-between to Turtle Boy, and even then, she started using the encryption app called Signal. And then once she was confident enough in Signal, she cut Natalie out and just started using the encryption app Signal with Turtle Boy, and she used it with people related to my channel too. So all her communications were over this encryption app. So I don't, know if she was very conscious of keeping her phone clean even before the police, even before she wiped it.
Well, that's another thing that I like to point out too, though, with that is she talked to Ted Daniel from Fox 25, she talked to NBC, she talked to ABC, Gretchen Voss, Boston Magazine, obviously Unsolved Productions with this documentary. She's done a lot of interviews, Vanity Fair. Every single one, she was completely open that she was talking to these journalists. Yeah. The only person that she hid her communication, and not just the actual communications, which obviously it's clear that she's taking great steps to hide that from the police and the public, but the fact that they were communicating at all was Turtle Boy.
Because he was showing up at people's houses and like personally attacking all these people. So like it absolutely was witness intimidation. Like without a doubt.
But if you think about it too, she was hiding their communication, the fact that they were even communicating before he even started doing that stuff. So I would infer from that it was the plan the whole time.
See, one of the things too that the elusive proof, this is not proof, but supports the idea of Karen doing this, comes from that documentary. So Turtle Boy had said last year when he was mad at Karen and he was threatening to go to the state police with information that would show that she participated in this witness intimidation campaign. And so probably that presumes he probably has screenshots of some of her communications that he was savoring to use against her if he ever needed to. But he made the claim that famously when Turtle Boy went to, so you probably aren't aware of this, Daniel, but Turtle Boy went to the lacrosse game of Jen McCabe's daughter, youth lacrosse. I don't know if it was high school or youth lacrosse, and harassed her in the stands, brought his cameraman there, figured that would protect him. And he was strangely saying to her, "You didn't think you could outsmart Karen Reed, did you? You didn't think that, did you?" He repeated it like 2 or 3 times. It was a very strange thing to say. And then later on, he said in his admin chat, which became public to us several months ago, he said in his admin chat that it was Karen, that was Karen's direct message to Jen McCabe. And so you're like, huh, that's interesting, right? But that could be just Turtle Boy's bravado, right? Turtle Boy just talking shit. However, in the documentary, Karen brings up the topic of Jen McCabe and then looks at the camera and said, it's either me or you that's going down. She actually uses the word you. She talks directly to Karen in that weird kind of way. And that's very consistent with the idea of her saying, hey, I got a message telling Turbo, I got a message for Jen. Say, you didn't think you could outsmart me, did you?
That's insane. I didn't know about that. But if there's something that proves that she is behind some of the witness tampering, for a defendant to be charged with something like that, that'd be huge. That'd be a huge negative blow to her case as well. I genuinely hope they find something. I really do.
There's like I said, there was enough probable cause to get that search warrant. They did try to indict once for conspiracy. It didn't work out. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that it was a lack of evidence. I believe that it was poor presentation, and that's as much as I can really say about that. Unfortunately, I just don't think that a lot of tactical decisions were made wisely in the first go around. I wouldn't know much about it because they're secret, but anyway, there was probable cause in the search warrant. They have all the messages between Karen Reed and Turtle Boy using the intermediary, Natalie. Natalie cooperated 100% with the police and gave over her phone. And so just to really solidify that, both Aiden Carney, both Turtle Boy and Karen Reed have independently in their videos, media interviews, whatever, confirmed that they were using this woman as an intermediary. So, where they could have just said nothing, which most intelligent people who aren't narcissists would just say nothing. They went ahead and confirmed that. So now you know that, she's telling the truth, right? And contained within those messages, grand jury minutes are being shared. Evidence that's not public is being shared. She being Karen, encourages Turtle Boy to go after the judge, to go after the witnesses, to go after the victim's family. At some point on her own, she gives witness addresses to Turtle Boy that's later used to bring a mob to these people's houses, and he screenshotted it. So there's a screenshot of that. There's a lot there. There is a lot there that shows that she has been not just involved, but I would argue the ringleader in all this. Nothing happens without Karen Reed's approval, and you can see that in the messages that have been released from Natalie's phone. He asks before he talks about something on his live show. He gives her full editorial control over every single blog post. There's a comment that he had put up on Facebook complaining at one point when he felt shafted, acknowledging that he used to copy and paste posts and put them up on social media for Karen. So, she really is in charge of everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can add a little bit to that too. Maybe Matt, you can comment on this. So back in 2023, when you and I didn't know each other, you were on TikTok and I was on YouTube, and we were starting to make that transition, asking questions about this case. And I had a partner. So Karen reached out to him over Signal, and gave him this information that she wanted us to run with, and that was the fact that the FBI had gone to Colin Albert's school at Bridgewater Bridgewater State College to. She wanted this out there because this would confirm, because we never, even though the rumors are going on all summer about the federal investigation, there was never actually anything official to corroborate that. And this was the first thing that they found that they could. So through a Freedom of Information type act, they were able to, or some other way, they were able to find out that the FBI had showed up at that campus to try to serve a subpoena to Colin to appear before the federal grand jury. And she reached out to Turtle Boy, but Turtle Boy was at Canopy Lake Park, an amusement park around here, with his kids. And so he couldn't run with it right away. And she didn't want to wait. So she tried to get us to run with it, and we didn't. And so she managed to get other social media minions to run with it. But the interesting part about this is when Turtle Boy the next day talked to my partner, he was raging. He was extremely upset because he thought we had maybe run with this, which we didn't. But he was pissed because he felt it was his right to go with everything first on this story. And what he said was, he said, I have a deal, in quotation marks, a deal with Karen, where I get to run with it first, so she gives it to me first, and she has a degree of control over what I say. So what that tells us is that she could have stopped Turtle Boy from this witness intimidation stuff that she was doing easily, because she could have said, look, we got a deal, but you doing this goes too far. If you don't stop doing this, I'm no longer going to give you the information first. I'm going to give it to someone else. I'm going to give it to Young Jelly or somebody like that. So I don't know. What do you think about any of that?
Well, she said that she don't really care about them because she don't see them as witnesses. Isn't that what her words were? So,
As suspects.
Yeah, exactly. She sees them as suspects in this case, although she's fighting zero for John O'Keefe. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that she's ever said that she was going to be wanting to do for John, find the real killers, none of those things. In fact, I think in her interviews, she talks about the people that she's going to surround herself with afterwards and what kind of world tour she's going to do, et cetera, et cetera. Just zero compassion and remorse or empathy or sympathy for John and his family. There's only 4 episodes, right, of that documentary, or is there more? There's more, right? This just hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, no, it's done. There were like technically 5 episodes, but it was shown over 3 nights, so it felt like more like 3 episodes. It was 5 hours of programming over 3 nights, and it's today they showed it again continuously on Discovery ID, and you can find it anytime on HBO Max.
Yeah, I've only seen the first 4. I haven't seen the last one. I need to watch the last one. But I don't think, up to the 4th one at least, it doesn't seem like it's in her favor. Like everything as far as even music, tone, everything as far as when it's her and the mob, it definitely does not look like it's a documentary that's going in her favor. I'm still dumbfounded by the fact that her attorneys allowed her to do this, and where it actually appeared on it as well, I believe. So, what are your thoughts? Do you guys think it's going in her direction? Do you think it's portraying it correctly, one way, one side? What do y'all think?
I mean, I don't think that they covered a lot of stuff. I think it was as much in her favor as they could be, but she's just such an unlikable, nasty person that's the best they could do. Like her attorney should have told her, like, you're a terrible person. You don't want to be doing all this media coverage. Like you are not likable. You sound like a psychopath. And I think she has a vendetta against Jen McCabe. I think when she found out that Jen McCabe was the one that called them back and started putting the pieces together, she's had it out for her ever since then. And it's coming off that way. It's like she's just so immature. She's really like not right in the head. And that's how it came off in the documentary. She was crying because she was like facing deliberation in the final episode, but she never cried for John O'Keefe. She smirked when they asked her about how he died and if you hit him with the car. She's like, can't even contain her smirk. But she's crying when she has to leave the seaport, when she has to go home, when the Karen Reed show is over. Like, she is just such a disgusting human being. Like, that's what I got in the documentary.
Kate, what does this tell us? Just like if we're going to put our amateur psychology hats, about this strange obsession with Jen McCabe?
I don't think that Karen likes other females very much. I think she's a deeply insecure narcissist. So I think that Jen McCabe represents everything. I mean, like, even in the beginning when she's talking about how she never wanted that white picket fence bullshit is what she calls it. I think that Karen protecting the fact that she does and she'll never get it because she's a horrible person. Like, honestly, that's what I think. So I think Jen McCabe represents everything that is completely outside of Karen Reed's grasp. She's never going to have a husband. She's never going to have children. She's never going to know the love of a family or that kind of stability. And, you know, certainly Jen McCabe, is a very social person. She has a lot of friends. She's very connected in her community. Just everything that Karen is not. I think I would agree with Matt that she probably does resent that Jen was one of the first people to kind of piece everything together. And I think that when she's trying to concoct her story to blame anybody else, right? Jen and Carrie were the two women that were with her that morning when they found John, you know, because I suspect that she saw him previously, but whatever. So she's got a choice, you know, sort of like she says it. I was there. Jen was there at this scene. It's either her or me, right? She can't really blame Carrie because that's a little bit more complicated. Carrie Roberts was all the way in Brockton on the evening where they were out. She was bowling with her family. She was nowhere near this, you know, party or the bars or anything else.
And she's not really connected very closely to the Alberts and McCabe. She's an O'Keefe person.
She wasn't connected at all. She didn't even know them. I think she had met Jen once in passing through John, right? So I think that Jen McCabe becomes that convenient person, pin it on the girl, as they like to say, pin it on the soccer mom. She's convenient because she is connected to everybody there. She was at the bar before. She was at the party. She was one of the last people to talk to John, and she was one of the people there this morning. And I think that, you know, Karen is really trying to jam a round peg into a square hole here with Jen. So she just keeps jamming harder and harder and harder. And I think she's angry at a lot of these witnesses because I think Karen figured by now that most of them would have buckled and gone away and her case would be falling apart, and they're not.
I think also someone who has a psychopathic nature, which 2% of the population does. So a fairly significant percentage of every human population has psychopaths in it. Most of them aren't killers. They might become your surgeon, you know, but there are other characteristics that we know famously with a psychopath. There's a lack of empathy for other people's, but their brains are wired different, and there are other things that go with that. And one of this is seeing the world in this kind of power play way. Everything is a power play as to who's going to come out on top, or anything that gets in the way of your perception of your place in the world. It becomes an enemy, even if they don't know it, even if they're a friend, they see themselves as a friend and they may have been nice to you. And I suspect that Karen would have looked at Jen almost as a rival before this John died, just because Jen is, my understanding, I don't know her personally, the kind of outgoing person. So that'll say, hey, you know, like look at that night. Jen is the one who went over and put her arm around Karen and said, you know, why don't you come with us or whatever. She's trying to be that kind of social coordinator kind of person. And from Jen's perspective, that's just making sure everybody's comfortable at the party or whatever. But from someone's perspective, like Karen, unbeknownst to Jen, who wouldn't realize this, that's a power play. You're being the alpha female by trying to control who sits where and making sure everybody's happy. And she's threatened by that. I don't know. Does that make sense? I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a drink maker.
I think she just doesn't like women. I mean, look at the way that she talks about Carrie Roberts, right? You know, in those messages, you know, that we're going through Natalie, that were actually between Karen and Turtle Boy, right? She calls Carrie Roberts a cunt, right? She was always a cunt. She calls Laura Sullivan. Was it Laura Sullivan? One of them. Fat, right? The Sullivan sluts. You know, the way that she talks about Tara. You know, every single woman that was sort of even down to his own mother, right? Like she even disliked the mother. I just think that Karen is so insecure and you know, self-absorbed that she really has a hard time with other females.
Yeah, I think a lot of it came off through Turtle Boy's reporting too, how he was so catty towards all these women. It did not sound like it was coming from a man the way he was writing. It was coming directly from Karen, the way that he was attacking all of the witnesses in this case. And I was recently listening to the people that sectioned Karen Reed, and she was going off like crying, and then all of a sudden she was perking up and saying, I'm not taking care of those goddamn kids. And then she was talking shit about Kerry Roberts. And this is right after John O'Keefe died. And so I think if she had the chance to pin it on Kerry Roberts, she would have, because I think she was the one that she really hated. Jen was kind to her. And Kerry Roberts was more like, shut your mouth, you're not helping, being more aggressive towards her. And Jen McCabe was kind to her. So I don't know. Karen Reed is just a nut. And I think she just hates everybody. And she's just like Turtle Boy.
That's probably why she attacks Jen, is because she was kind to her. She can't stand up to the person who wasn't. It's more of a cowardly thing than anything else. I mean, everything else. I mean, she's not. It's pretty cowardly too. I mean, throwing these folks under the bus and saying that these guys are the ones that committed this crime instead of owning up to what she did that night is pretty cowardly on its own as well. And so, yeah. I mean, I guess you can't expect anything less.
This is why when in the documentary they showed her the video of Allie McCabe crying on the stand under brutally unfair. Well, initially Allie was provoked by brutally unfair questioning by David Yannetti, and then later I think it was back to on direct where the door was open and she was able to talk about some of the harassment that she's experienced, and they showed this to Karen, and it's really impossible for a normal human being not to be moved by that. Just a normal college kid who's going through this for no reason, and this kind of harassment of her family and herself and her friends. And it was very hard not to be moved by that. And they showed that to Karen to see if she was moved. She wasn't moved at all. She grinned and smiled the whole way through it, and then said, well, I don't really feel anything because these people should be suspects. So, the way a psychopath would look at that, to her, Allie McCabe is just an obstacle to her getting what she wants, and they hate obstacles to them getting what they want.
I just want to be fair and say that we don't know that she was shown any video at all, or if that's the one
that could have been editing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they definitely asked her about it. Like that's, right. And probably I would assume that was probably part of a broader question about like, hey, do you feel bad what's happened to these people at all? And I mean, even still, and I think it's very interesting. I can't remember, was it the Ted Daniel interview maybe, where they ask her, well, have you been threatened? And yes, of course I have. No, you haven't, you lying bitch, but whatever. And then, well, have you been harassed? Well, no one's come to my house or my parents' house. You can tell like she doesn't want that to happen to her. And I don't want it to happen to her either, to be fair. Right. But she revels in it happening to these other people. And I mean, just the way that they shouldn't be witnesses. They should be suspects. According to who, Karen? According to who? Not according to the DA, not according to the police, not according to the FBI or the DOJ, right? Only according to you should they be suspects. Like, it's psychotic. It's absolutely psychotic.
Yeah. I'm just going on Twitter now to see what the latest buzz is on this case, if anything. Is there anything else that we wanted to talk about in terms of the strange financing or astroturfing or anything along those lines?
When it comes to financing, what about the fact that, or what do you guys think about the fact that Karen Reed's defense team basically gets thrown under the bus by the judge when it comes to ARCA, when it comes to them financially paying for, was it almost $24,000? Says that there was a what's the term that she used? Material, that it was material that they were being specifically they're just lying about it. Right. What do you think about her actions behind it? I mean, absolutely nothing was done. I strongly suspect something's going to be done after the fact, but I think that's going to play a huge role in this trial coming up. But how big do you guys think that was, and what do you think about her reaction to it?
Mm-hmm.
She did indicate that she was going to sanction them. I think that people are misunderstanding because she didn't take any action as far as the Pro Hoc BJ, which, I mean, she did the colloquy with Karen at sidebar. Again, I'm not wasn't there, but I'm fairly certain that she probably went painstaking through, do you want to get another attorney, so that she essentially waives her appeal as far as ineffective counsel on that issue, right?
Right.
So there's a trade-off there for sure, first of all. And the impression that I left with is they will be sanctioned. That's just not it. I'm sure that there's going to be a BBO referral. Absolutely. It's a big deal. Are they going to be able to bring it up in trial? I don't think so. Yeah. Are they going to absolutely destroy ARCA on that issue? Yeah, that's probably coming.
Well, I mean, if ARCA's saying that there was a clip there between, I believe it was Yannetti and the ARCA witness, where they said that they had never spoken about anything outside of just arrangements, and that ended up being a lie. They literally lied and purged themselves on the stand in this specific case. That's the first thing that I would bring up. Have you ever said something that was inconsistent with the truth? and continually beat that down as soon as they step on the stand. I mean, to me, I thought that's going to be huge. And if they put them up there, I don't know. I mean, I thought that was, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that something that you can bring up?
I mean, you're talking about bringing the lawyers on the stand?
No, when they,
I think he means ARCA.
When they talk to them and ask them, hey, when he says whatever, like, hey, we're going to talk about your credibility, because that's going to be a question in every trial, your credibility. And have you ever lied on the stand? Have you ever exaggerated the truth? Have you ever said something that was inconsistent with the truth? And then when it's specifically to the Karen Reed case, I think that's going to be something massive for the prosecution, unless you're saying, can they bring it up? I know they can't bring up the financial part about it, the $24,000 range, but what about the fact that there was a specific question asked and answered in trial on this specific case, and it was inconsistent with the truth? Can that be brought up?
Yeah, they're gonna bring up any inconsistencies.
Yeah, the payment too. They can't bring up the fact that the court found that the lawyers lied, though. Which was why I was confused, because I think the likelihood of the lawyers actually being called as witnesses are like slim to none. I think most likely what's going to happen there is that the lawyers are going to stipulate to her statements, like, yep, they're all true and accurate from the media stuff that they're using, and that'll be the end of that.
Right.
I mean, I think the biggest thing with the ARCA is, like, Lally did not go into a lot of detail with them, and now we have this voir dire coming. Hopefully soon. Hopefully it comes even before the trial. But Hank is going to go after them big time, because, like, why did they shoot the back of the car with a potato cannon? Lally never asked them that. I think they were trying to, look for another theory, right? And, like, but that didn't explain the other bump in the back of the car. But I think, asking them that on the stands, like, why did you come up with that? Why did you think that? Because you're ignoring the other damage on the car, the scrapes along the side and the dented in back. So why the hell would you shoot the car? Why would you think that it was thrown? Like, who gave you that idea?
It was interesting too. So the apparently, if the ARCA guys are telling the truth, the U.S. Attorney's Office did not give them any kind of a theory. They didn't tell them what the state's theory was. They just gave them a pile of information and said, make your own conclusions. And the ARCA guys didn't really consider a wide range of conclusions. This is when me and Kate went on the Brother Counsel show. It just was stunning. He said, the ARCA guys considered an infinite, that's the word he used, an infinite range of possibilities. No, they didn't. They considered basically one, and then they expanded that to two when they were on the stand. So the first one was the idea that John threw the cocktail glass, and then the second one they did apparently, from watching the case or something, they talked a little bit about John having his arm out, but they had it in this weird position, like a Nazi salute position. They never talked about the possibility of John being struck in the arm and knocked back where he hit his head on the ground. So that was not something that, in this infinite range of possibilities, that the ARCA guys in their original analysis after they were hired by the feds, that's not something they even looked at. So they really did a really shallow study on this, if you ask me.
They ignored half of the damage on the car, like they're idiots, or they were told to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no other. So are they dumb? Are they incompetent? Or did someone direct you? And I mean, that's the question that he needs to get out of them.
And I don't think somebody is going to call it. I think it's always going to be subtle. It's not going to be like the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to call up, or let's just even take the U.S. Let's just say a regular defense attorney, and they're shopping around for someone that's going to, as you know, Jen Coffin-Effers talked about it on the channel, and they're shopping around for someone that's going to provide testimony that will help their client. They're not going to come out and say, "We need you to lie for our client," or "We need you to conclude this." They're going to send you the material and let you look at it, and then you'll get back and say, "Yeah, my conclusion is going to help you," or "My conclusion is not going to help you." If you're a dishonest expert, and there are no shortage of them in the country, you're just going to say, "Yeah, I'll testify, and this is what I'll testify." I think what happened with the U.S. Attorney's Office is that they gave them the information that they gave them, and just through very subtle means made clear what the results that they wanted. And the ARCA guys just tried to please their client, which is, especially when your client's the U.S. government, you want to do that. But I don't think you're going to find some smoking gun, or I don't even think if the ARCA guys were to, they're not going to, even if you put them under truth serum, they're not going to say, "Yeah, Josh Levy called us up from the U.S. Attorney's Office and he said, I really need you to help me hook this Karen Reed person up." I don't think it works that way. I think it's more subtle.
Right. But we need to find out what they were asked, what they were told, because they didn't just come up with this stuff on their own.
Right.
And that's what he needs to get to in the voir dire. Like, he needs to really drill down on them. Because clearly they were on a side. Clearly they had an objective. They knew what it was. They're a litigation firm. Like, people hire them to argue either the accident happened or the accident didn't happen. And no one's sending them $30,000 unless they're going to be on their side. So they obviously, you know, they present themselves as their independent experts. Like, that is their business.
Right.
But they're not, because they are signing a contract with whoever hires them, and they're going to take one side or the other, because accident reconstruction, there's definitely more than one.
Right.
Conclusion
They always
you can
know
come to.
who's hiring them and what they want.
Right.
Right.
Who pays
100%.
more? Usually the state or the defendants or the defense. You know, I know in the Brian Koberger case, the defense is getting paid quite a bit more than the state.
Yeah.
And so
could usually,
could there be a motive of like, hey, we want to be called more by defense teams because they pay more? I mean, you know, I think there's the possibility there in this situation that could be a motive here. You don't go in there and say that there was, he literally purged himself on the stand. There's no absolute ands, its, or buts about it. He said they never spoken about it, and they did. I mean, that's black and white, yes or no. Was it right or wrong? There's no in between. And how they're going to be able to testify or with any type of credibility from here forward is beyond me, you know, because if there was ever a case where they get hired on by a defense team, that's the first thing I'm going to ask is, have you ever said anything that was inconsistent with the truth on the stand? And I'm going to bring up that specific time. And, you know, that's why, like, for instance, Proctor, I could never believe that he would ever be a detective again, because his credibility is out the window. You know, he's never going to be able to take a stand and say anything just because of what has occurred and his termination and everything that's followed behind it. You know, even if he can keep his license, I'm not entirely sure that's going to end up being the case there. But, you know, if he finds himself on a department, it's probably just traffic stuff, you know, because credibility is shot. And in my opinion, if you get caught lying on the stand, I mean, how much can you believe? If they're willing to lie about that they had never spoken, there was never any contact between them outside of arrangements, how can you believe anything else that they're saying?
Walter, just to answer to Walter is a free Karen Reed person, and he's explaining to us, I guess because he thinks we don't understand, that they made the shot glass cannon to determine how fast the glass had to be thrown in order to produce the damage that was seen in the taillight. But that's not the issue. The issue is who gave them the idea that John threw the glass at the taillight, and what other issues why didn't they consider a range of other issues? That's not even what the state concluded. And also, very importantly, if you're you're creating this cocktail glass cannon, and you're going to fire it at different speeds to see what speed it would take. And I think they ended up determining it was like 35 miles an hour or something like that. But as part of that scientific testing, you would really want to know if the car was going in reverse, which we don't even know if they knew that, but what the speed of it was going in reverse. That's just elementary physics. If the car is going backwards in reverse, then that's going to impact how fast the glass would have to be thrown to break it. And they would have that if they had the text stream vehicle data. They did not have that text stream vehicle data. They are experts on text stream data. Their website advertises that. And even if the U.S. attorney was somehow unaware of the text stream data, they should have got back to them and said, hey, is there any text stream data? This is Alexis. So
it's garbage in, garbage out, as Karen would say.
As Karen would say. Yeah.
We don't
Their
even know the
hypothesis was garbage.
where did it even come from is really the question, right? Like, where did you get this from? Nobody ever even suggested that was a possibility. They also like took great pains to say like, nope, that taillight didn't hit his head. Like, nobody said that it did. So why
are you ignoring all the other damage? Like other damage that correlates with an arm or another body part hitting the tailgate because there's a big dent. So that's garbage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. The hypothesis is garbage. Like, your conclusion is garbage. Like, get the fuck out of here.
I mean, they didn't seem to know about the DNA on the taillight housing. They didn't know about the hair found on the back that was, now granted, it was matched to John after they did their initial report. But there seems to be a lot of important pieces of evidence that they didn't know. So the question would be this: are they so married to trying to support their older opinions that they won't adjust their opinions now that they have that information?
I think they are, because they're a litigation firm. So their conclusion that they came to, they want to show. Yeah. If you hire us, we will like prove that, you know, you didn't hit them or you did hit them. Like, whatever side you want us to take, we're for sale, and we have credibility. They don't want to really say, you know, we're for sale, but like, that's what it is. They're a litigation firm, and they will prove and they will present on the stand well, because that's what their business is.
Mm-hmm. I think where the brilliance of Hank Brennan has come in on this and seeing several moves ahead is that to get this done, like, to show that the ARCA witnesses were hired, the ARCA experts were hired by a biased federal government, is a nearly impossible task, because you're never going to have smoking gun evidence. And even to the extent if that evidence existed, the U.S. Attorney's Office is never going to release it to you, so you're never going to get access to it. So, but what Hank has managed to do here, though, is it's just very cleverly from step one all the way through this here, is get it to the point where I think the judge, and when you parse her words last week, she was saying, I would be able to say more on this instructions when we get further down the road. So I do believe that she's going to be able to somehow thread this needle where the defense is not allowed to present ARCA to the jury as hired by an independent agency. They're just going to go. I think that they're just going to be allowed to go to the jury as just ordinary defense experts. We'll see where that goes. But if that's the case, I think it was brilliantly played.
Well, yeah, and trying to lock in people's testimony too. You saw him do it with Murray Russell, and you know, I'm sure that, you know, with this voir dire coming up for ARCA, same thing. You know, that way they can't pivot later on.
Right.
I mean, sunlight is the best disinfectant, but like, they've had a year to give the ARCA a new expert all of the information. They had raised $800,000. Why don't they give sunlight to someone? Give them all the information and ask them what they think, right? Because they don't want the truth.
I got a question. This is more for Daniel, because he's former law enforcement, and I don't know when you retired from it. But did you work with geofence data at all?
I did not. You know, when I was
put a request for it or anything like that, or
no. When I was in law enforcement, we were still using video cassette players, and so to record on our stuff. No lie, that's when I started. I appear younger than I am, I think, but no, I've never had to do any of those type of things with geofencing or anything like that. I was never an investigator to that extent. I was mainly just a local law enforcement officer, from beat police officer. I had aspirations for being to be a detective. I had a good buddy of mine who's now and probably as high as you can get in his department. I'm very proud of him. He used to be a homicide detective who was my mentor, so to speak. Long story short, I'm no longer in law enforcement. I had a pretty serious back injury, and I end up finding my own business through it. And so, you know, that ended up was what, almost 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, closer to 15. So when I got out, it wasn't anything that I was doing. You know, I can get some information if you'd like. What is your question?
Yeah. So what? And I think Kate knows where I'm going with this, but I'll direct this question, finish the question with her. And somebody on chat just asked, what is geofence? So geofence data is basically something you don't need a warrant for this. You can just get a regular subpoena request to the not even a subpoena, just a request to the communication companies. So you'd want to find out within a particular geographic location, within a particular time range, what devices were detected within that. And it's something that I think is probably in a lot of cases routine to try to find. Not all cases, obviously depends on the circumstances of the case. So the question, Kate, is: do you think the U.S. Attorney's Office? We know in November of 2022, so pretty early on in this case, they subpoenaed the phone records, the communication records of pretty much everybody the defense had cited as a suspect here. Now they don't need warrants for that because it's just it's not the content of the communications at that point. It's just the actual so-and-so called who and this, that. Would it have also been routine for them to just get the geofence data? What do you think?
Routine, I don't know. The only time prior to this that I really heard about geofencing being used is like, say that there's like a mass shooting, like or the Boston Marathon bombing or something like that, right? And they're trying to figure out what cell phones were in that area in that time period to try to, you know, focus in on a suspect. I've never heard of it in this context, but like, I don't know that much about it. So
I would say that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that they used it in the Idaho 4 case to see what phone numbers were around, or like, I think they probably had like a ton of phone numbers, right? Because it was like a very densely populated college area. But then they found, I don't think it led to anything because there wasn't anything. I mean, I think there was just probably too many in the list. But then they did use it to determine that Brian Koberger's phone was there other times. I think he wasn't there during the time of the murders because his phone was not connecting to the tower. But they found, they expanded the search warrant at one point and they found that his phone number was around the house and multiple times. At some point, so, but I hit and run. Like, what the hell are you doing a geofence data for?
Right.
Come on.
Well, no, the state police might not have needed it because they knew that John didn't go in the house, but the feds would have needed it because they were investigating whether John did go in the house. So they, and that's why they got the communications of everybody involved, all the Alberts, the McCabe's, everybody in the house. So wouldn't that have just been an automatic to get the geofence data? And it was less than a year. So they would have had time to do it and just find out what devices were in that house, what time to call and leave. Was there anybody in the house that shouldn't have been there? You know, you could look at geofence at other datas too, other locations rather. At the Canton Police at 1:30 when Brian Higgins went back, or did he meet anybody strange there? Right? You know, who was there? You know, I'm just trying to. I don't. You know, if you're really investigating this case, why not do that?
Because I mean, it's what I understand is geofencing is more to like. I mean, frankly, if they have access, which we know they did to their phone information, right, their iCloud and stuff. You can just use the GPS data from the phone. Like, I think geofencing is more used when you're trying to like narrow in. If you already know who was there, more or less. I mean, I guess if they wanted to see if other people were there too, that I don't know. I don't. Yeah.
Well, I don't think they had access to Colin's phones. So the only phones they had were Karen's and John's and Jim's.
They had GPS.
Right?
They had GPS data on Colin. They did.
Oh. Now, how would they get that?
Karen. I think Karen was saying in the beginning she didn't know who was in the house, right? So like she's like, they won't even tell us who's in the house, or we didn't find out till a year later. Like, oh, Julie Nagel killed him. Like, are you kidding me? So like, but
if they had GPS data on, I'm sorry, man, but if they had GPS, I really do apologize. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just stuck on this. If they had GPS data on Colin's phone, why didn't Lally present that?
No, not Colin's phone. I think they referenced it a little bit with the Life 360, but they had information, particularly from Allie's phone. I know for sure was
which is
provided
different. Yeah, right.
to the FBI.
And
right?
and again, Lally didn't use that,
right.
so
Right.
we don't know why. We expected he was going to, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Matt.
I really wonder why. I mean, in those 5,000 pages or 3,000 pages, I would imagine that there was a lot of verification of the state's case, and
Mhm.
why didn't they try to use that, or they couldn't think of how to bring it in, maybe? But nothing really came in except for the damn text messages and like, Matt McCabe saying the Asian house, like really stupid stuff to try to prejudice the jury against him. And it's just kind of shocking that that's what the judge let in, because like, why? To just like get him and like corner him and be like, oh, you don't remember this text message you sent 3 years ago? Like, of course, nobody remembers the context of the text messages. And of course, like things can be taken out of context and sound bad. I just think that, in those 3,000 pages, there was probably a lot of verification of the data. They verified that there was no exculpatory evidence, right? Because someone would have been indicted if there was.
Right.
So,
Right.
Well, the way they can get it into the trial is through a rebuttal witness. You would anticipate that the defense is going to utilize a witness that's going to say something about Colin being somewhere else.
Mhm.
And then you bring in a rebuttal witness, which would be the expert on the phone or the phone expert to determine where he was exactly.
Right.
That would probably be
Right.
the easiest way to bring in that information into trial.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Like, so if let's say the Freds did get GPS data, let's say they got geofence or something similar to that had specific reports of data, cell tower data, or something like that showed what time exactly Colin left. How would you introduce this? Because you need an expert or you need a witness to introduce it. Adam Lally can't just start submitting reports to the judge, So I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it, right? I mean, do you give that report? I don't know, because you had the protective order signed by the feds, so I don't think they could just take that info. So if they had geofence data from the feds, I don't think they could give that to Trooper Garino and have Trooper Garino present it. But I don't know.
was the Life 360 data, where did that come from? That came directly from
Jen
Allie
McCabe's
McCabe?
phone. Yeah, well, Jen
so
McCabe
Jen McCabe provided it?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they had Jen surrendered her phone. Probably the biggest mistake.
No,
for
but later on, more information was provided to the FBI. I'll just leave that there like that. But yeah. So I mean, yeah. Sorry, if there was exculpatory evidence that the FBI drug up outside of like Trooper Proctor using mean words, it would have been used. It wasn't, right? And I think it is weird that Lally didn't. I mean, like from what I understand, what they've stated in open court anyway, like something like 90 to 95% of those pages supported the state's case. Why they didn't use any of that, I don't know.
Right. I mean, I believe that getting certain data like that is easy enough that they would have done it. Look at the links that they impaneled a federal grand jury. They went to incredible links in September of 2023. They got a warrant to get the content of the messages from most of the people in the house. They went 5 years back into Michael Proctor's messages. So it's not like they were doing this casual, okay, let's take a little look into this. No, for the U.S. attorney himself to grill the witnesses, they had an interest in proving that Karen was innocent. Now, they may not have had that at the beginning when Yannetti talked him into it or whatever, but by the time that they were digging hard, they had an incentive to get to prove that Karen was innocent. So they would have got anything that was obtainable. So I believe that they have evidence that they did not turn over with that 3,000 pages that exonerates the witnesses. And they're not required to turn it over. They can turn it over. They're entitled to, but they're not required to. They're only required to turn over Brady material, which only applies to the defendant. And so, I'm trying to find ways to make the case that they have this type of evidence. So that's why I asked about the geofence data. To me, if it was somewhat routine for them to do that, we could make that argument. I don't know. Does that make sense, guys?
Yep. I mean, so it seems like they just had stuff that would help the defense because it's all impeachment stuff because we weren't really, the Commonwealth wasn't really cross-examining any of like their witnesses, anything that the feds had anything to do with. So there was just all this impeachment evidence that was turned over. It's ridiculous.
So what do you guys think? Go ahead, Daniel.
To me, I just think that the prosecution may have came in a little bit overconfident last time, thinking that the evidence would speak for itself. The lack of dog DNA, the microglass in the clothing, the video at 5:23 a.m. that shows that she's missing, ginormous pieces of her taillight before anybody had any idea that John O'Keefe had passed. I mean, when you look at just the actual evidence on its own without any narrative behind it, whether it's the defense or the prosecution's narrative, it's pretty clear cut. And I think that they went into this overconfident thinking, all right, we don't need to bring an expert in this or that because we don't need to bring an expert in the crash because there's micro pieces of glass in his shirt. I mean, what's the point of spending the money on doing that? Well, we don't need to bring an expert to talk about the dog or the supposed dog bites because there's no dog DNA. Why bring in the expert to pay the money in that? And I think they're going to learn. I think they've learned their lesson this time around. And I think it's showing that they're going to have a few more experts on their side this time around, if I'm not correct.
Yeah. I think, I don't know that I would characterize it as overconfidence per se. I think that they fell into the trap that the defense had set, right? Where like they focused so much on like trying to disprove all this like ancillary bullshit that they really kind of lost the plot on the actual facts in this case, right? So I think they expended way more time and effort, especially as you got closer to trial, trying to chase down every bullshit accusation and lead that the defense was throwing out, and they really kind of let their own case slip. Most of their witnesses were trying to like undercut or disprove the conspiracy that doesn't need to be disproven because it is patently insane, right? Like, but that's what they did.
Yeah.
I was watching that documentary and I wanted to bring this up, that reversed image that they were making a big deal about where the vehicle's pulling into the Sally Port. That's the first time they pulled in the vehicle, correct? That's the first time they got it. Is that correct? All right. So people find it suspicious that the first opportunity that the lead investigator had to look at the vehicle, he looked at the vehicle. I mean, that's the first time it's pulled in. It was in a blizzard. It looked like it was snowing, at least at the time that they were pulling it into the Sally Port. What it looks like he's doing back there, because I'd wonder what's the argument there. I mean, all you got to do is uninvert it and you don't see anything different. And I think that in the documentary, it brings up their argument, that the argument is that at some point Proctor goes behind there. And I was watching it and I was looking at it, and what he's doing is he's just kind of moving his head back and forth. And it's because this is the first time he's actually got a chance to really look at the taillight in a controlled area. Up until this point, it's been outside, it's been in the elements, it's covered in snow, the whole 9 yards. So this is the first opportunity the lead detective has to actually get a glimpse at the side of the vehicle that's damaged. And I don't know any lead detective that would not take that opportunity to look at the damage of the vehicle. It's just insane to me to think that there's some sort of conspiracy attached to that.
I'm going to share a post up here by Nurse Kim. She's responding to somebody else, but she said somebody else is a chart up. She goes, this will require a ton of additional research, but I have the following initial thoughts on data points from the Mass Department of Transportation. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but one, a 12:30 a.m. crash at 34 Fairview. Where do they get 12:33? I don't even know why is this the Mass Department of Transportation? I don't even understand where that is supposed to come from. John was struck at 12:32 and 12 seconds plus or minus 2 or 3 seconds from there, within a range of that. We know that. It's not 12:33, because their point is that the fact that her Wi-Fi connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 and it's around 12:36. We don't know. It could have been 12:36 in 45 seconds. We don't know. But that would make it, if John was struck at 12:33, that makes it tighter, because now she's got to make that trip home in 3 minutes. But at 12:32 and 12 seconds, which we know from the vehicle data correlation with John's phone, that's perfect. It means she had to make the trip going just a little bit above the speed limit. They're averaging 35 miles an hour, and that matches up perfect with arriving somewhere around 12:36 and 30 seconds. But I don't know what this Department of Transportation stuff is.
So what is she trying to argue? I mean, she's out to lunch. She's so deep in it. She's definitely getting paid. Dave Cullinane, like her friend that she used to always be on, he was on TikTok. He dropped his whole TikTok channel like months ago, and I used to like try to appeal to him because I feel like he was a decent human being.
I think he is. I think
he knows that she did it now, and now he went out and he met Karen and he went out to dinner with her, and he knows that he
believed
it.
her though. He believed her. I mean, actually, I had a lot of private. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I had a lot of private communications with Dave. He reached out to me, say maybe a year and a half ago, and I didn't really know who he was. He's connected to the Kirk Minihane show, and he was just came across as someone who obviously kind of maybe preferred to believe in the conspiracy, but was trying to legitimately get the evidence from both sides. And I do believe he's a really nice guy. But after that interview, he told me both privately, and I was on a show with them too. He said, no, she believed her story. And so he believed her. But something seemed to have caused him to change in more recent months. I don't know what. Because by then he was still pretty adamantly freaking read. No, he was still that made him more. No, after the dinner, he was more Karen Reed.
Oh,
that made him more Karen Reed. But something else has happened more recently to make him seem to back off a little bit. I don't know what. So what do you guys think about, I don't know, you may not be aware of this, Daniel. Matt certainly is. Kate certainly is. So we learned Friday that a motion was filed by the prosecution to get Karen's communications with her attorney on the day of the accident or the incident, and a couple of days after that, within that range. So attorney-client privilege texts, and it seems stunning, right? But I read the motion on the channel the other night, and it does seem by the letter of the law, there is an actual statutory law that says when someone has waived attorney-client privilege. And now, attorney-client privilege is sacred. That's like the 11th commandment from the Old Testament days. Very, very rare to see the idea that this might be. But technically, by the letter of the law, she does seem to have waived her attorney-client privilege in her statements that she's made to these documentaries. But what do you guys think about that?
I love it. I hope that Hank sticks it to them.
No,
call David Unetti.
I've been saying this for a while. When the amount of information that she was sharing her attorney's work product with people. So essentially what happens, and I only know this because I was sued by a sovereign citizen once before. So like I had the lawsuit with Discovery and motions and all that. Your lawyer sends you a copy of the motion before they file it. You look it over. Yep, looks good. And then they file it, right? So she was getting these motions to review and then sharing them with other people. That's work product at this point. I was like, well, that's really precarious for your attorney-client privilege. And then, of course, the emails about the fee agreement, which is how we know that she paid her attorneys before she started fundraising, $200,000 and $250,000. Right. So the whole time I've been like, wow, this woman really doesn't want to have any attorney-client privilege, I guess. But so I think she probably has. Practically, do I think the judge is going to allow that? Probably.
It seems like a huge reach because that's going to be, if there's anything that's going to make this reversible, this case where they'd want to revert, where the Supreme Court or the appeals court would reverse the judge, it would be, in fact, she might even get a stay of the trial for something as big as that, So
you think so?
I think that the goal is to stop her from going out there and getting this story out there, get her to stop talking to the press, stop building a mob with bad facts and bad information. Because at this point, can the prosecution go out there and say, hey, you know what she's saying on this documentary is wrong. This is the fact. They can't argue back and forth here. So this is just a one-sided argument from her side. And, since the prosecution can't go out there and maybe perhaps debunk some of the things that she's saying, they're probably, especially given how much this has been already in the public appeal or public court of public opinion, they probably want her to stop talking. They probably,
Yeah.
to a certain extent. I mean, I don't know. I mean, as a
I
former
don't
law
think they want her to
enforcement,
stop
I would
talking.
love her to keep talking.
I know.
I don't
But
think they want that at all. I think
but
they're
I
just
think
capitalizing on what she's done, right?
Right,
Mhm.
right. Yeah, because I was gonna say, I was like, she keeps putting her foot in her mouth every time she talks. So I would be surprised, but it's almost to like an extent where like, all right, she can continue to put her foot in her mouth, but at this point, does it matter? I mean, she's changed her story how many different times? She first initially came out with her lawyers and talked about this being an accident and that there was no intent behind it. And then once the charges get upticked, then it's this whole conspiracy. I mean, so does it matter what she's saying, even if it's contradictory to the truth or what she's been saying in the past?
Mhm.
It still kind of seems to be working for it to a certain extent with a certain group of people, don't you think?
Right.
Well,
I'm
The
sorry, I
tainting
just
of the
have to take a
jury pool.
minute. And Christine Mitchell is in my chat, as she always is, being fucking stupid. No, Christine, the Commonwealth has never done a press conference because they can't. It's not because they know or believe that Karen is innocent. They clearly don't believe that. They're trying this case as many times as it's going to take, really, Christine. No, it's they can't give a press
Mhm.
conference. They can't do that. They're ethically,
Right.
because you would know that, except you don't even live in this country and you are fucking brain dead. So thanks for joining us again. Your presence is always really appreciated. You add nothing to this conversation, but it sure is entertaining.
I did get word of something, I don't know, about 15 minutes ago. I don't think I'm gonna mention it. I've suspected Kate probably got word of this too, so I'm just gonna be vague about it. But involving the police at a certain address tonight. Did you get this, Kate? It's probably best to not mention it, right? I would think and draw attention to it. Okay. All right. That's what we'll do. Sorry to be vague about that. I didn't know if Kate gave it the okay, it's okay. We can talk about it, but
I would hang out till Tuesday,
yeah,
possibly tomorrow. Like I said, I think this is going to become like a thing,
yeah,
as it should.
yeah, absolutely. So it's unfortunate. I don't think it would do any harm to talk about it, but just on the chance that it does, I'm not going to draw any attention to it. All right. So I reached out to a retired judge that I talked to see if she wanted to come on and talk about this issue with the attorney-client privilege. And she didn't have time tonight. She may have time after this week. She believed that, it was just extremely unlikely to see a judge grant that because it would make her so open to being reversed. And that was already my feelings on it too. But she also, then she said something that I disagree with. She added that she feels that the state's big mistake in the first trial and still in this trial, and she said it's the reason she thinks they might lose was the issue of intent, is the way she put it. Now, this was a text message conversation, so I didn't push back on it, but I don't really understand what she's saying, because if you don't prove intent here, you still have the manslaughter charge. So I figured I would just share that. I mean,
Definitely the first case. I don't think that Lally really proved the second degree murder at all.
Yeah.
I don't even think he tried to really, but
It's
I think
difficult
Hank
to
Brennan's
prove.
going all in. Yeah, Hank's going all in because all of these interviews and all of this psychotic behavior. I mean, I think it's gonna give you a psychological profile of this woman who, you can't accidentally back up 24 miles per hour. You can't. No matter how many people want to say that, the people that suddenly realize that Karen is guilty, that's the first thing that they go to is oh, well, maybe it was an accident. It's not, you cannot reverse 24 miles per hour, 100 feet by accident. And, her voicemails show that she was pissed. And then all of a sudden she's like, nobody knows where you are. You can hear her tiptoeing around in the driveway. She's looking at the damage. She didn't call 911. She calls all these people, starts all these stories. She left him there and she let him die. That's second degree murder. And Hank's going to go in.
So actually, go ahead. Let me just put it up. Go ahead.
I think you can prove intent. I mean, you'd have to put some work into it. Like you mentioned, going in reverse 24 miles an hour is one thing, but also where his body landed. I mean, if you look at the area and look at where he landed, I think it's pretty apparent that she swerved at him. And, if you can prove that she swerved at him, you have the text messages before and after, you have the Aruba incident, you have the fact that she was the one that was reaching out to somebody else, and not just anybody else, but somebody who had John O'Keefe's number and Brian Higgins, somebody who was maybe not necessarily in his inner circle, but somebody who I would say that is probably a tier up when it comes to their career. You know, that is a clear sign of somebody who's very vindictive. You know, that you see the pattern there. You see how angry she is. She can't control herself. I mean, she can't even control herself in the courtroom. I mean, the way she looks at the prosecutor is just right out disrespectful. Now, I haven't seen the first trial in its entirety, but when I brought that up before, a lot of people mentioned something about her having to be told by the judge a few times in the last trial about her attitude or laughing or something to that nature. But this person cannot control herself, even in the public eye. I think that they have the ability to prove intent here. It just might cost them a little bit of money to prove it. You know, if they can get the expert to go out there and actually show how the physics work and how his body ended up where it did, I think you can prove it.
Okay, you can respond to that. And also, Heather here put up, and Heather is a recovering lawyer, and she says, I don't think that if Hank thought he could prove second, he would have dropped the charge. So I think what she's saying is Hank obviously believes he could prove this. Is there possibly, though, another reason to keep that charge on, even if you think you're unlikely to make it stick? Like, is there a way of looking at jurors where they might be in the room and there might be some horse trading and compromise that goes on? So if you have a legitimate second-degree charge up there and some of the jurors have bought into it, that horse trading gets you to manslaughter instead of something lower, or OUI manslaughter instead of something lower.
That would be unethical. Really, the prosecution can't move forward with the case if they don't have a good faith reason to believe that they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's this misconception that they play these, hardball games, and no, that's not how the justice system works. If they can't prove it at trial, if they don't believe that they can prove it at trial, like good faith believes, and they are, ethically required to dispose of that charge. But with her, again, there's that third prong, reckless, endangerment. There's the question of when she found out, why she didn't call 911. There's a lot of things that can prove intent there. And I'm so sorry. I just put in the chat though, I'm getting paged. I think you know what about. I gotta drop. So sorry.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Come back if you get something on it and that you can go with.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, just to respond to that, I wasn't trying to imply that the state was throwing a charge in there that they didn't think they could prove. There's a difference between having a strong case of evidence and you feel like you have enough to throw up there because the jury is called the fact finders. They are the finders of fact. So if you have, for instance, the fact that Karen Reed went backwards 24 miles per hour in an area where John was and other people could have been, that's the reckless endangerment aspect of it. You also have some other evidence. You have the missing ring videos, which I think is a key if you can ever prove were deleted by Karen. And you have the fact that her alarm systems would have worked. You have some of her strange behavior at 5 o'clock, saying, calling Kerry Robertson, saying I hit him, saying that John's dead and he hit by a plow. So you do have enough there where theoretically, I just think that you also, you might, as a practical matter, say, all right, you're probably unlikely to get 12 jurors to agree on this. However, there's enough to prove it, and there might be a benefit where they do some horse trading in there. I don't. Is that crazy? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a thing where you have the higher charge and, some people compromise and go with the lower charge. That's not the way it's supposed to work, but I think that does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think the murder too, there's two different ways that he can prove it. It's either that she intended to hit him at the scene, even if she hit him by an accident though, and left him, that's also murder too. So there's two different ways he can go about it. So I think that, I don't know which way he's going to go with. But Lally really didn't choose either one. I think Lally probably was kind of insinuating that she left him. I think it's very obvious that she left him. She was calling saying he was dead and he got hit by a plow. She knew where he was. So leaving him to die in the cold, that's second-degree murder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
gonna go ahead.
I think that this is the time to threaten with higher charges and stuff. That happens, but that's early on. That's past. That's like during and at the time of arrest. That's something that the police do. Like, hey, we're going to charge you with this if you don't tell us this, or whatever the case may be. Typically, the rule of thumb when I was in law enforcement was you charge them as high as you can, and then you let the lawyers figure that part out afterwards. It's not. The other way would be backwards. You know what I'm saying? For them to try to do it that way. But does that happen where they overcharge somebody just to try to get them to plead down to something else? 100%. I've seen that happen quite a bit. But at this point of where they're at going into trial, that's usually not the case.
Just want to remind everybody to help support me on this. So I worked very hard on a book on the Karen Reed case that is finally now available for pre-order. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. I'm going to put the link in chat. And so please, it's not an expensive book. Just help us drive that Amazon algorithm by just spending a few bucks on this. And so I just put it in. Thank you guys. I'm looking on Twitter to see if I can find anything that's reporting what I was talking about. And I assume Kate's getting the calls on. I just don't want to put it out there unless it's already.
Turtle Boy going to jail? Is that what's happening?
No, it has nothing.
Damn it!
I don't think to do with Turtle Boy, but I don't know if he could. It could. I don't know if he's involved in this, but he's certainly indirectly involved. But I'm looking to see if I can find anything.
Is Karen's bail being revoked? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Sunday night, so think about that. There's very limited things that can be going on legally like that. So it's something else. Not sure who might be reporting this where I could go to look, but because I gotta think that something would be on Twitter on this.
I mean, if Karen was locked up during the trial, that would be epic because she'd be freaking a maniac in the courtrum.
Well, it would save her a lot of money.
Control.
It would save her a lot of money on the Omni bill.
Oh, she doesn't care. Her idiot supporters are paying for that.
Oh, man, that's got to be one heck of a bill. We should call up the Omni and find out what they charge because she was there for the entire trial and it sounds like for maybe for much of the last year.
I'm gonna come up and I'm gonna stay there.
At the Omni
during the trial.
Good.
I had a thought on the because I never really answered my thoughts on the text messages between her and her lawyer. I personally don't think that's right. I'll be honest with you. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think that there's other ways to convict somebody. If they committed the crime, there's evidence, and the evidence should be what's convicting them. The discussions with their lawyers are usually private. Now, she's gone out there and publicly said some things, and I think that those things that she has said publicly 100% should be used against her. Especially with her lawyers, they're present. I mean, it's not like they didn't know. You know what I mean? They were actively participating in it as well. So those things 100%. But when it comes to somebody's messages between themselves and their lawyer, that's I think that kind of sways into probably I don't think that's right. But I think it's a good thing to make her sweat. I don't think it's going to end up working. I like the tactic to make her sweat. I really wouldn't have liked it if it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the crux of it is that she was talking to him. She admitted in the documentary. So like, if they can even bring that in, is that she was like, well, what if I hit him? What if I hit him in the leg? Am I still responsible? And he was like, yes. And like that conversation, it's like, so you literally are admitting that you did something, you knocked him down. She said on another interview, he didn't look mortally wounded. So like putting all those pieces together, she knows that she hit him. And I think that is what happened. She hit him. She didn't think he was mortally wounded. And that's why she started calling again and again and again and again, hoping that he was going to get up. And then when he didn't, she decided to make up a story rather than call 911.
Matt, are you following the Kohlberger case at all? Because Daniel's kind of an expert on the Kohlberger thing.
I am. I'm not as closely as I was in the beginning. But
Yeah.
I guess that's because there's a gag order and there's so many filings coming in now that I think they have the right person.
Yeah. So let's
Yeah.
let's do some Kohlberger talk since we have Daniel here. Daniel, what's the latest going on with this?
Latest thing is that they found or they have made it public now. Some of us have known for a minute, but they've now made it public that Brian Kohlberger did purchase a K-bar knife, sheath, and a K-bar knife sharpener off of Amazon between March 20th and March 30th. Now, when you read the documents, it specifically states there that they knew that he had purchased it between March 20th and March 30th, 2022, and that's why they were specifically looking for those 10 days. They have a witness to the purchase. Now, to me, it's not a friend. A lot of people were talking about, oh, there's an informant in this case. Well, here's their informant. It's not somebody who just saw him with the knife, right? Because that doesn't determine when he purchased it. He could have had it for a long time. So we'd have to think about if they're willing to pinpoint it within a 10-day window. That's because somebody who's an authorized user notified law enforcement of that purchase. Now, I don't think that notification happened prior to his arrest. I think that was a post-arrest notification. I think it was one of his siblings. To be honest with you, that's just my personal opinion. But
that's a good theory. Yeah.
But Brian Kohlberger's family,
or his dad, even, right? So
correct. Brian Kohlberger's family, when he got arrested, released a statement, and there's only one statement they released. And in that statement, they stated, we have fully cooperated with law enforcement. And they were, something about the preservation of the presumption of his innocence and allow the court to do its thing, not necessarily that he was innocent. And, I thought those were pretty big clues. There's a selfie of him, though, that is insane. He took this selfie. It's now out there. It was at 10:30 that morning. So the murders happened at 4 a.m. 6 hours later, he's taking a selfie. He has some headphones, his shirt buttoned up all the way. He's in his bathroom and he's got the thumbs up going on. And a lot of people are looking at this image, because he's really his face looks weird. Well, one, he looks really methed out because he's super, super skinny. He looks nothing like he does now that he's been in prison for a couple of years, which, people that go in with a drug problem usually typically start to look healthier because they are getting clean during that time. Well, anyways, super pale, but this guy's face just looks like he did the deepest wax, Brazilian butthole wax on his face, to just super clean, right? And people started comparing that to the American Psycho movie, and I'm not sure if you've seen that with Christian Bale, but there's something interesting there. So I hadn't watched the movie, and I decided to watch it, and I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was watching this movie or idolized Patrick Bateman, the lead role in the movie, the serial killer, because it starts off where he says, I'm 27. And then I realized something. Brian Kohlberger was 27 at the time of the murders. He was fixing to turn 28 the next weekend. So a lot of people ask why that weekend. And I was like, maybe something there. And then he goes on in this entire thing. My name's Patrick Bateman. I do this thing with my skin. He gets in the shower and he talks about all these different oils. And then at the end, he does this wax thing and peels this wax off his face. Man, that dude's face looks so much similar to, and eerily similar to, how clear and clean cut that Brian Kohlberger's face looked up in this.
I wonder if he had business cards made.
Right, exactly. But when it comes to
that was a famous scene from the movie.
Yes, it is. Yeah. He talks about during that scene. He talks about how it's just a mask. There's nothing in him. There's nothing about him. He's nothing. And Brian Kohlberger wrote about those type of things, about feeling very similar, not having those type of emotions and such. In fact, his defense team has now indicated those things to be true. They're trying to utilize that in their motions as to try to reframe the prosecution from using the term sociopath and psychopath, and I guess because they claim that he's on the ASD, on the autism spectrum disorder, and so that has come out. Man, this guy, he was up into sales. He learned from Kathleen Ramsden. He took a class called extreme violent crimes. And in that class, he had to learn and study about BTK, Kathleen Ramsden did the autobiography with BTK. You know, I strongly suspect that this guy idolized a bunch of these serial killers, these movies, where he may have even thought that, hey, I'm feeling some of the same things, right? I'm a mask. I don't have these feelings, yada, yada. I mean, to be honest with you, after hearing what he was saying there, it was almost like in his writings as a teenager, because he would have been a teenager at this time when that movie came out, was very similar to what he was writing about his lack of feelings and how he sees people. I wouldn't be surprised if he was watching that movie around the same time as when he was making those writings.
Yeah, right. Matt, do you have any thoughts on any of those cases? Or,
I mean, yeah, 100%. He definitely watched that movie. I just think, you know, when you see all the pieces kind of fitting together, and that's what it seems like is happening here, is that, you know, he did all these things all that morning, and then he takes this selfie after he did this loop around the world, probably got rid of evidence, like washed up. And then he takes this selfie, and like, was it just in his phone? Did he send it to anybody? I mean, I think that's what I want to know. Like, was he on social media? I think we don't know any of those things right now.
Right. Have y'all seen the selfie?
Connection? What's that?
Have y'all seen it?
I've seen it. It's creepy as hell.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
He's like,
what do y'all think's in his hair?
Like,
is it just dye?
I don't know. I know that they're like some of the stuff on like their list, like they had his shower curtain, like on the there was something weird about the shower curtain and stuff. Like allegedly they didn't find any DNA of any of the victims in any of his stuff in his apartment or in his car, anywhere, which is strange.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Now, if you take a close look at that, his hair is not normally that red. I mean, it could be dyed. Now, did he dye it in preparation because he knew he was going to commit a crime, and perhaps you know there might be something stained? And so
when was this taken? When was this picture
6
taken?
hours after the murders.
6 hours after the murders. So
6 hours after the murders.
And I think he didn't get home till, I mean, it's probably right when he got home, took a shower, like, because I think he was over there at 9 a.m., right?
Yeah, so he got home at around 6 o'clock in the morning, and then he goes back to the crime scene at 9, and then at 9:30 he's back home, and then at 12 he's in Clarkston, Washington, which is about, I want to say about an hour and a half or hour 45 minutes away. And so he took this picture in between that time. Now I just did a Google search. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. You know, I do know that the blood did get stuck to me, like with my bite on my arm. So I did a search, and it said that if you don't wash out blood right away, it will stain your hair and your skin. He didn't go straight home. You know, he took a long drive home. I'm not necessarily saying that this is all blood, but
yeah, I think it could be something to do with the photo too. Because, well, first of all, I want to notice that the witnesses, the survivor, her main identifying thing that she pointed out was bushy eyebrows, and these are some incredibly bushy eyebrows. Like unusually bushy in this case here. I don't know why they look so bushy there, but you notice the redness though in other parts of the hair. So I think the redness might be a feature of the photograph.
Yeah, like low quality.
Yeah, it's in his eyebrows and around his eyes, and so but
even
I mean,
that shirt buttoned up like that is just weird. It's a Sunday. And like, who buttons the top button like that?
So this is the original photo. That one was an enhanced one. I apologize. Okay. This is the original. And the one thing I do notice though is that looks kind of bruisey there at the neck.
Hard to tell because it could be just like hair from the way he was shaved. I think it looks more like hair, but yeah.
I feel like this trial is going to be horrifying when we actually find out all the details, because like the roommates' calls and everything, like the texts, they only gave us one piece, but it seems like there was something that happened before that they didn't share in the file. Whether it was the girl upstairs, Kaylee, screaming, because they seem to be overly concerned with Kaylee.
What?
Like, Kaylee, what's wrong?
Yeah, that's true. That is true. The defense is trying to make something out of Dylan and Bethany, that they conspired something together because they were in a room together for like 6 hours or so before the 911 call.
Yeah.
You know, what about this part, guys? So you guys know that his supposed alibi claims that at some point that night he was at the Walleye Park. Walleye Park is the same location where Joyce LePage's body was found, and she's been theorized to have been Ted Bundy's first victim. Now, a lot of people have come in saying, no, that's not the case. She wasn't Ted Bundy's. She's somebody else's victim. You know, yada, yada, yada. I don't think that makes a difference. I think what makes a difference is did Brian Koberger think that this was Ted Bundy's first victim? And what do y'all think about if he committed this crime, which I strongly suspect he did, and his alibi was that he was in the same location where Ted Bundy started? What do y'all think about that? Somebody he studied too.
I mean, that would be interesting, but I feel like they came up with this alibi after a year and a half. Like, I mean, I feel like if this was a real alibi or like he had this planned, it would have come out right away. I don't know though.
So what are we thinking about this picture? Why is he taking a picture 6 hours? Is this right before he leaves to go back to the scene? 6 hours. So that would be right now. This is actually after he's already returned to the scene of the crime.
The murder's done. Like, this is it. This is his post-murder photo.
So he would have got home around 5, and he was caught returning. Well, his cell phone data shows that he returned to the scene of the crime at 9:30. So this would have been taken after 9:30, right, Daniel?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was about an hour after that. He had just gotten home. And what he does afterwards is interesting. So he goes to Clarkson, Washington, and then he goes and visits a couple of places in Albertson, a coffee shop, all right there along the Snake River. And then after that, he drives up to Johnson, Washington, where he turns his phone off for about 5 hours. And now he's going to be in this exact same area where his phone was off, or the area immediately after the murders. So if you were to look at a map at Moscow, Idaho, the neighborhood in which where these murders occurred is the neighborhood that's furthest south of the city. So once you leave that neighborhood south, you're leaving out of town. And you know, when he left there, it was at 4:20. There's an image of his vehicle taking off at a high rate of speed, or a video of his vehicle taking off at a high rate of speed. You can actually hear screeching and tire marks. That's not out yet. I know for a fact that it's there, just kind of like I had the 911 tape about a week before that was released too, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, anyways, we're going to find out that you're going to see at 4:20 and some change, Brian Koberger's vehicle taking off at a very high rate of speed out of that residence. And when his phone turns on at 4:48, which is about 28 minutes later, he's about 10 minutes south. So there's about a good 18 minutes there where was he? You know, he had to be doing something in that area. And he goes back to that area for about 5 hours before he heads home. That's when his phone is off. And so does this shirt look like you're going to be out in the woods for 5 hours? I don't think so.
So I just wondering you're always trying to get what's in their head when he's also given a thumbs up signal. So is this his big day? This is the culmination of everything he's been dreaming about for 10 years, committing this kind of murder.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is there's another image of him in 2020 where he looks like this skinny. And in between then and this image, there's video of him accepting his degree at DeSales and other images, his graduation image, where he does not look this skinny. You know, I'm wondering if he did this before and if his weight loss is an indication, or maybe perhaps his weight gain is an indication after the fact of a job done. You know what I'm saying?
Is there a finger? Somebody, Mary Ann is saying to zoom in on the finger injury. Can you zoom in, Daniel? Is there a finger injury?
I've seen people saying that. I don't know. I just feel like people are always looking for that.
There's dots on his hands. I mean, this looks kind of weird right here. This right here, I guess this bottom part does kind of look like a scab. You see that?
Yeah, would it be a scab that quick? I mean, but it could be a Band-Aid too, right?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know.
a drop of blood drying could look like that. I'd say I'd have to look at his hands. There's a lot of images of his hands. His hands are like super red in every image that he had when he was like right after he was arrested. And they showed him walking around arrested. His hands looked weird, like purplish almost. And, I thought maybe it was a situation with the handcuffs, but every single time on both hands. And then you didn't really see like cuff marks either. And early on, this is when they were allowing cameras to zoom in. You didn't see those. So for me, I think that he probably had some sort of, reaction to washing his hands with bleach so much, those type of things.
Yeah, right. Because he would have been scrubbing quite a bit by this time. I mean, job one, presumably, if you've committed murder, is to clean yourself up as thoroughly as possible, getting blood out from beneath your nails or whatever. I mean, so he would have been scrubbing himself down pretty good, right?
Yeah. And his hand looks swollen. I mean, this finger right here looks kind of swollen.
I would say I don't really see injuries, but like his knuckle, like his hand looks, there's something up with it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't know. It's just so strange that they did not find any victims' DNA, hair, dog hair. Well, that we know of. There could be.
Well,
in his apartment or his car.
Well, here's the thing, right? So where would you expect to find DNA at, right? Would you expect to find DNA in a situation where you had a guy that committed 4 homicides in close range with a knife and have no time to clean up? Or would you expect to find, or would you expect, where would you more likely expect to find DNA in that scenario? Or, in his car, his apartment when he had 7 weeks to clean it? I would have expected it more so with the close combat, and so, you go into it and what DNA did they use? They used the DNA on the knife sheath, which tells me that there's not a hair or blood or any of those things that were left behind, which tells me that this guy went through a lot of planning in order to accomplish that. And that planning doesn't stop at the murders. That continues at the getaway, checking for surveillance, dextering your car, so to speak, those type of things. And also maybe perhaps getting a hold of cleaning supplies. Now, I've had Howard Bloom on my channel. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. He's written
I bought his book. Yeah.
I've had him on the channel, and he had broke on our channel, on my channel, that Brian Koberger allegedly is being investigated for breaking into the chem lab. Now, I had heard about this. And the crazy thing about it is, if you look at where the chem lab is, it's very close to Nevada Street, which is the street that he was driving around in Pullman right around the time his phone turned off. Now, I looked into it. That's where it's located. And what's in there are a bunch of things, not just chemicals, but office supplies, anything, including, gloves, those type of things, but also dispatch radios. And I think he had one of those with him. Well, anywho, Howard Bloom suspects that he's being investigated for making a bomb and that he was going to do something horrible with it. And it seems kind of far-fetched to a certain extent. But then again, I mean, this guy lost his job as a TA, as everything was going down the drain. They
didn't find any bomb materials in his apartment, though, right?
Not to my knowledge. Not at his apartment complex, but nothing has come out of it. I had heard about this, that he had utilized equipment from WSU. I thought it was just luminol and stuff like that to search his vehicle. And when you listen to Ann Taylor, there was a hearing, and she mentioned that when it came to the DNA, that they didn't find any blood of the victims, but they found some sort of spray on everything. And then she kind of caught herself and then spoke about other things.
Oh, so this would be a sensible thing to do if you're going to commit a murder. If you happen to be a murderous psychopath, and then you want to clean your car afterwards, you clean it as thoroughly as you can, and then you spray the luminol to see if you missed anything, and that would light up the blood, and now you go clean it again.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, that's so creepy. I mean, I think that's the thing that I've always thought, like, because he applied to work for, I think, a few different police departments that we know of. We don't know if he got hired anywhere, but did he have access to like the body cams? Because the cops were always showing up at that house for like noise and stuff right before the murders happened. So was he like stalking them through police like surveillance, you know?
Right.
He had a job as a security officer at the high school that he had attended when he was in high school, which is also a high school that he didn't finish. He actually finished online. In fact, he was in the law enforcement program and was forced to leave. A person familiar with what had occurred had mentioned that specifically he went from the law enforcement class to a room or to the HVAC class because it was an all male class. And then she even mentioned something to the effect that, you know, now knowing what he's alleged to have committed, it kind of makes sense what he was alleged to have done. Now, she didn't say what it was. I have an idea of what it was from what I have heard through, you know, the grapevine and stuff like that, was that he had to put on an app on some girl's phone, and that app gave her location to him, and she didn't know about it. And so, you know, he ended up getting released from that. Well, anyways, he then applies in the spring of 2022 for the law enforcement class, or to be an intern. And we know that because there's emails that are released in April of 2022 of him thanking the chief for their meeting, yada, yada, yada. And then in the fall, we know he applied again because the PCA specifically says that in an essay that he wrote when he applied in the fall for the intern police department, that he was, you know, specializes in cloud forensics. And so that tells me he didn't get the job in the spring. Now, if I'm going to take my best guess of what happened there, it probably had to do a lot with background check, you know, him losing his job as a security guard. We also have a termination letter or a resignation letter from Brian Koberger from that job as a security guard, where he puts in there that he understands that if he doesn't resign, that he could face termination board and be terminated. You don't put that if you're going to a different, better place. You put that if you're getting threatened. And so, you know, he lost that job. He had a known history of heroin. He had been arrested for a theft before of his sister's phone while he was addicted to heroin. I think that resulted in him going to some sort of rehab, which ended up getting the charges dropped and expunged. But that's still there, and information that the law enforcement would have access to. And so it's not like he could have lied and say, "Oh no, I've never had a drug problem." I mean, you have an outcome of an offense, being that you have to go to rehab. So clearly he had one. So he's not probably the best candidate to be a law enforcement officer, given the fact that it was expunged and, you know, he hadn't had any probably criminal history since. You know, my best guess is they told him something to the effect like, "Hey, go to the semester. We'll run this again. No problems. You'll end up getting through." And what ends up happening within a month, he's already having altercations with his professor, and there are female students that are documenting his disturbing behavior with other females and professors. And this is all going down within a month. And within the first semester, he's fired. You know, this was the first time that this guy lived on his own. You know, I think that's probably, if he hasn't committed a murder before, that's probably the reason why. This was the first time he was alone. And within a few months, look what happens.
What do you think would have happened if this guy became a cop?
Oh my God.
I don't think he would have gotten there. You know, there's a lot of things that you have to go through, you know, psych eval, psych board that it's going to bring it out. Right. You know, his professor was a lawyer, John Snyder, and he was a defense attorney who represented murderers and thieves and from everything from small time crimes to all the way to death penalty crimes. And so I think he read right through Brian Koberger. And I think that when you go through a law enforcement background check, I mean, it's fairly thorough. And not only is it thorough, but you have to sit there with a detective on multiple occasions and be basically interrogated about your past and future and et cetera. There's a lie detector test that needs to be passed as well. And then you got to go through an interview board with multiple detectives and high officials of the city that you're going to hopefully be working for. I don't know if he would have been able to have handled the pressure of those situations and keep that mask up. You know, I think his majority of his success in college when it came was because it was 2020 and COVID was a thing and it was online. And so
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
it wasn't anymore when he moved to Washington.
Do you remember? I think it might have been your show. Someone called in, was like, some Sigma Chi guys were asking me how to like cover up a murder. I don't know if it was
no,
your
that was
show or
not-
someone else's.
No, that was not my show. That was somebody else. That
Okay.
ended up being fake.
Oh, okay.
I got word from some folks that that guy who called had said that the creator from that channel had orchestrated that.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
So Turtle Boy says he posts 8 hours ago. The lead prosecutor said his own address out loud in court. I'm a journalist reporting that information.
Oh.
Hank Brennan is being paid $250,000 in taxpayer money so far to prosecute this case. I assure you, he is cashing in on the murder of John O'Keefe more than I am. I mean, it's just, I don't really listen. And that insane idiot in our chat still, Walter, who I guarantee also watches and supports Turtle Boy. Do you buy these explanations? Are you that slow to buy these explanations that Turtle Boy, hey, I'm just reporting his address, you know, because that's newsworthy. Come on. He's putting that out there and dog whistling his crowd to do something unethical. That's the only reason to put it out there. It's pure doxing. And it's just disgusting what these people think they're going to do. And as far as Walter, yes, I've seen your idiotic comments here going on and on about John's injuries. You know what? Tired of arguing with you. There's so much evidence in this case that shows what happened. We got the trial in a month, in a few weeks. Just wait and see, brother. Just wait and see. I mean, we've had enough evidence in the first trial, but we're going to have so much more evidence in this trial. And interestingly, I don't know if you noticed, Matt, too, the other day when the defense was complaining about the new accident reconstructionist that they brought in, Aperture, that it sounds like they did some kind of experiment with paint. And so what I'm thinking is maybe they had, you know, like a dummy, and I don't mean like Walter, but just like a crash dummy, and they put paint on the arm and maybe ran some kind of a test with a taillight housing to see if it made those. I'm just guessing. I don't have any information on that, but to see if it made those parallel lines.
I mean, I think that's I feel like they probably did. They probably did go through all the trouble this time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that if people show up at Hank Brennan's house, they'd be really stupid because I can guarantee he carries. He represented Whitey Bulger, and I can guarantee that he's packing. So have at it. Like,
You know, that was the fact that he represented Whitey Bulger was a huge thing. I just could not stop laughing about the other night. You know, I was talking about the case with my wife, and I was like, yeah, apparently, you know, it was a mistrial because of this, that, and a third. But, you know, Massachusetts said, F that. We're going to go get this dude who represented Whitey Bulger, and it was a defense attorney that is, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, you can see the difference between the two, the tier, the type of lawyer that he is, in my opinion. He has the other guys backpedaling a little bit. You know, when I didn't really watch a lot of the first hearing, I think I've seen like maybe 10% of it. I mean, it was so bad that I honestly thought that Chris Albert for a long time was Brian Higgins. Like, just because that's the only part of the trial I had seen, I'd really stayed away from it. And, you know, I forgot where I was going with there, but, you know, just overall, I just think it's, you know, putting his address out there is insane. I mean, the intent behind it is what's insane. Obviously, anybody can go find it and do what they want to do with it or whatever the case, you know, there's some crazy people out there. But the intent behind putting it out there, you guys are right. It's not newsworthy. It's not something to report on. What's there to report? What's the headline? Like
I think it needs to be reported. So I guess me and Kate disagree on this. So I respect Kate enormously, but to me, there are always going to be Turtle Boys out there. He's a little bit more popular and unusual than some of the other ones, but there are people like Turtle Boy out there in other cases that'll show up in a state near you where you live that will do things like this. And one of the only ways to stop it is expose it. I'm not talking about doing something that's going to create more incidents, so you have to wait. But I don't think exposing what Turtle Boy is doing here and doxing the prosecutor is going to create more incidents. And hopefully, it makes some people like Walter here possibly have a pang of conscience and say, "What have I attached myself to here? What have I attached myself to that I don't question these things?" So, I think it needs to be reported on.
I mean, have you heard about Bullhorn Pat? I can't even think of what her name is. Bullhorn Betty, I think. She is kind of like a turtle boy, and she's in a lot of trouble for harassing. I don't know. She's doing very similar things to what Turtle Boy's doing, and she was held accountable, and she can't go near other people. But like Turtle Boy, for some, Massachusetts is just so lenient compared to like other states, where you're gonna just be allowed to like First Amendment, but you're allowed to like go harass witnesses, harass prosecutors, like
right.
I don't know.
I mean, it's the thing. I do believe in the right to free speech, and I don't know where the legal line is here in terms of having the law be able to protect the witnesses and stop someone from doing things like that. But I've always taken the position that, if nothing else, at least the better way to protect our speech is for decent people to have the courage, the balls to stand up and say enough's enough. And it don't seem to be. I mean, there's the decent people on the other side with the courage to do something like that. What is there? 3 of them? I mean, you're talking to Walter. Do you have you say you're not attached to Turtle Boy. Do you have the balls to stand up and say that what this guy's doing is wrong? You're a free Karen Reed person. You say you're not aligned with Turtle Boy. Then make a public statement that even just say right here in chat that what this guy's doing is wrong and needs to be stopped. And it's very important to stop it. So if you have any manhood within you, that's what you do. That's what the right thing to do is. But I'll leave that up to you.
Anyone that says like, I don't agree with Turtle Boy, and then they're completely repeating all of his talking points, I'm just like, people do it politically all the time. It's like, shut. Like, you know what they are. Like, they don't have their own thinking.
He says, what is he doing? He's been here for the whole show. We're talking from the start of the show about what he's doing. He's doxed the prosecutor in the case today in order to try to get that mindless mob of which you are a part of to go after him, to go after his house. And if you, we can no longer pretend you don't know what this guy does. If you've been following this case long enough, a couple months ago, trying to threatening to bring a mob to the kids' soccer games of the Attorney General, who's a youngish woman in this state. It's crazy to try to pretend you don't know what this mob does.
I think it would be pretty crazy for somebody to try to go do something. I can't imagine that the prosecutor lives in a non-gated community, given his, career and probably, the financial gain behind it, or financial means behind it. I apologize. I think anybody that would show up at his house is probably going to get arrested for trespassing into that community, for one. But if they do, I think there should be something more than just trespassing. I mean, it has to be, because it's borderline threatening, and it's despicable. I mean, it's almost like, you're trying to enact getting swatted, where somebody calls like those type of things. It's dangerous. You don't know who's listening. Somebody could be taking that as some sort of sign and be deranged and think, all right, I need to go do something. I have his address now. You're giving me his address as a directive. And even though he may not be, you don't know everybody.
There's no journalistic purpose. And he did it to me going back a few months ago, where I don't listen to his show, right? And I started getting calls. It was a Saturday night or whatever his show's on, and I started getting calls. Heads up, you're going to get a lot of incoming calls because Turtle Boy just publicized your phone number on the show, and that's what he did. And I got a bunch of calls, including like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and It's not the end of the world, but there's no his idiots try to pretend that there's some, and he knows better, but his followers are idiots, as are most of the free Karen Reed people. I'm sorry, they just are. And so when he says, "Oh, I'm just a journalist doing my job, putting out Hank's address," fuck you, Turtle Boy. You know, give me I don't even want to say fuck Turtle Boy, because honestly, what bothers me more is the people like Walter who won't stand up to him, who are sitting here, you know, trying to pretend that they're self-righteous and they care about justice and blah, blah, blah. No. You don't get to pull that shit anymore with me. You don't get to pull that shit anymore. You know what this guy's doing. You don't have the guts to stand up for it. So let's just call you what you are, you know? If you're condoning this, if you're not criticizing it, you're condoning it. So, apologize. I didn't mean to sound a little moody.
Tell everybody how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, it just stinks because it's gonna be, no matter what. Like, I'm sure Hank Brennan has guns all over the house, but like, I'll just say that. But he's going to be, you know, worried about his family. There's going to be like all this crap, and it's like he has a job to do. He's just doing his job. And it's bullshit. It really is. And, you know, the state of Massachusetts is way too lenient. And this is what happens when you have too much freedom, right?
Well,
I mean, they're difficult issues, but go ahead. Yeah.
Rights are, you have the right to do whatever you want until you start to infringe on the rights of others. And Brennan has the right for a peaceful night and a peaceful life. He doesn't, you know, somebody going to his yard and yelling and disturbing the peace in that manner is disturbing his rights. And so that's what in my opinion, or my view of the Constitution is supposed to be, is you have a right to do whatever you want. You're a free person. And so your freedoms start to infringe on the rights of others. And we have to remember that he has a right to peace. And, you know, going up to his house, I surely do hope, if anybody does, that they get dealt the full extent of the law. Not sure if they will, but I hope they do.
Yeah, this being Massachusetts, if somebody broke into his house and he pulled a gun, he'd get charged with a crime.
Yeah, well, there's some places like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Some places. I live in one of them. But all right, guys. Well, is there anything else you want to go over before we call it a night? No,
I mean, what day are we going to court this week?
Tuesday at 11 o'clock. So okay. I'll make the event and send you guys the invite. So everybody that's listening, Tuesday at 11 o'clock. So these guys are welcome, and hopefully Jen and Kate will be back. And Jen's been with us through most. Would have been good to have her here for the last show, because there was an issue that came up in the hearing where the prosecution is trying to exclude a witness that the defense is using, a former FBI agent, a retired FBI agent, who is, it sounds like, is just going to come in and testify for the defense that the investigation was sloppy. And it's like, that's just, if that's all he's going to say, I don't think that's going to be allowed. That's ridiculous.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just, that's subjective, and it's not. If you know, obviously every defense team would love to have someone to come in with FBI next to their name to say this investigation was sloppy. I mean, everybody would use that, you know. And every investigation is imperfect. You know, there's always something that some expert could point to and say, "Yeah, we wouldn't have done that." You know, right. I mean, it's just. But I don't know. This expert, Easler, I can't remember his name. Is it Easler? Something like that. He has an expertise in cell phone data, like using to track down and locate people. But Alan Jackson didn't talk about anything like that. So I don't know if he's going to testify about that in trial, because it would potentially come in play. So the state tried to argue by looking at the cell tower information that Karen Reed had when she went out looking for John after 5 o'clock in the morning, that the cell tower showed her going in the direction of 34 Fairview. So in theory, he could come out and say, no, that's not what it shows. I mean, I don't know. But I don't know. The defense didn't argue that. So
I think he's just a free Karen Reed freak, and, you know, he has credential, and they got him on board just like the rest of their experts. So, well,
he's from Los Angeles.
Oh, I wonder what cases he's worked on with Alan Jackson.
Exactly. So, all right.
You know,
Good.
I put a poll in my on my channel, and I did this the first time when I first started talking about Kieran Reed, and it was very much so Kieran Reed is innocent, like 70 something percent. And today, Kieran Reed, still no doubt innocent, is at 43%. There's some other things there. It's I always thought she was guilty is at 36%, so it's a little bit less than that. But the change is that I thought she was innocent. Now I'm not sure. Comes in at 13. And I thought she was guilty. Not sure is only at 6. So, where it was like 70, 75%, I think she's innocent. Now it's 51% of some form of, I think she's done it, or I'm starting to consider her to do it. I think that's a huge testament to this prosecution, how they've handled this. The trial hasn't even started yet, and I think that some people are starting to see past some of the BS. I'll put it out just as what it is. But I think that
Matt, somebody actually had a good idea. So I'd like to get Matt's comment on this, but Jan, you're probably aware of this too, that there were Ring videos that are missing, at least 2 or 3 that are missing from that morning, and they were never able to determine who deleted them from where, what time, or anything about that. So I think it was Heather, on one of our friends here, that had the insight that what if you went back to an earlier, like say in the weeks before this, to see were there any videos deleted from John's Ring, because that could be interesting. Because, for instance, we know there was a night that she kissed Brian. She walked Brian Higgins out to his car and planted a kiss on him. So there could possibly be a pattern here if you could see some other videos that have been deleted. I don't know. It's something. It's a good idea. So Matt, give Hank a call tonight when you get off. And
I mean, I think there is something there, because I remember that Proctor was trying to say something about the Ring videos, but they were like, nope, hearsay. Well, they didn't say that because they can't say what the objections are, but it was because it was hearsay. Right. So they did give him some information about whether they could actually see if someone deleted it or not. I don't know, but so I think they'll have a little more information this time.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody on the witness list that is from Ring Video, and I think that's what they would probably need, right? So it may be just one of those. Yeah,
even if it was a signed document that they got, then Proctor or whoever, Buchanan, I almost called them the wrong name, could present it.
Yeah, and they didn't present it last time, even though going back to the older charging documents, they were already mentioning the deleted Ring video, implying that Karen did it, but then they never presented any evidence for that. It was just one of so many strange and baffling aspects of this case. But
they were surprised by something from Ring. Remember, like the defense had something from Ring that Buchanan had never even seen, and was like reading it on the stand. It was like shock. So like the defense had a lot of surprises that first trial that they're not going to have this time.
Yeah. And they wouldn't. I think it was, what was it? I forget if it was Proctor or Buchanan or somebody else that had, one of the other troopers, but they had talked to a Ring representative on the phone, but they can't present that. That's where the hearsay stuff comes in. They would have to bring in that Ring employee or somebody from Ring to actually present that evidence, unless they had documentation, like you said, like some kind of a printout or something like that. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I will send out the invite for Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock. There's always changes in this. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about that morning, stuff that happens tomorrow. It's a case that never stops. And everybody, I appreciate it again. So if you can, please consider picking up the book. It's for pre-sale. It's called Storm of Suspicion, and it's available now. At least the Kindle version is, for pre-order. It's only like $6.50. So give us a little support there and help tickle the algorithm a little bit. All right, guys, thank you very much. And everybody else, thank you. We'll see everybody Tuesday.
Have a good night.